Good. Oops, there we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Pinole regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting on September 22nd at 7 p.m. The public may attend in person at the Pinole City Council chambers at 2131 Pierce Street in Pinole, or can attend via Zoom teleconference with the details to be provided later. The public may submit a public comment in person at the Pinole City Council chambers, or by filling out a yellow public comment card and submitting it to the city clerk. Via Zoom, the public may submit a live remote public comment via the Zoom video conference call. You can download the Zoom mobile app from the Google App Store or Google Play. If you're using a desktop computer, you can test your connection before joining the meeting, and there is also the ability to join via phone. The webinar ID is 865-053-0537-5301. The public may also join via phone by dialing 1-669-900-6833 or 1-253-215-8782 or 1-346-248-7799. Speakers will be asked to provide their name and city of residence, although this is not required for participation. Each speaker will be afforded up to 5 minutes to speak. Speakers will be muted until their opportunity to provide their comment. When the chair opens the comment period for the item you wish to speak on, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if connecting via telephone, which will alert the staff that you have a comment, and press *6 to unmute when you are ready. To comment with your video enabled, please let the city clerk know when you would like to have your camera turned on when it is your time to speak. Written comments can also be submitted to the planning staff before the meeting at tham@pinole.gov. Please include your full name, city of residence, and the agenda item that you are commenting on. Other ways to watch the meeting are live on Channel 26. They are recast the following week. The Community TV Channel 26 schedule is published at the city's website. This meeting will also be live streamed on the city's website and remain archived on the site for 5 years. If none of these options are available to you, or if you need assistance with the public comment, please contact Planning Manager Dave Hannum at 510-724-8912 or at dhannum@pinole.gov. In compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, if you need special assistance to participate in a city meeting or need a copy of the agenda or the agenda packet in an appropriate alternative format, please contact the city clerk's office at 510-724-8928. Notification at least 48 hours prior to the meeting or time when the services are needed will assist city staff in ensuring that reasonable arrangements can be made to provide accessibility to the meeting or service. Please note, city staff reports are available for inspection on the city's website at www.pinole.gov. You may also contact the city clerk via email at hbell@pinole.gov. Any persons wishing to speak on an item listed on the agenda may do so when the chair asks for comments in favor or in opposition to the item under consideration. After all those persons wishing to speak have done so, the hearing will be closed and the matter will be discussed among the commission prior to rendering a decision. Any person may appeal an action of the Planning Commission or the Planning Manager by filing an appeal with the city clerk in writing within 10 days of such action. Following a public hearing, the City Council may act to confirm, modify, or reverse the action of the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission may act to confirm, modify, or reverse the action of the Planning Manager. The cost to appeal the decision is $500 and a minimum $2,500 deposit fee. Note, if you challenge a decision of the Commission regarding a project in court, you'll be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing or in writing delivered to the City of Pinole at or prior to the public hearing. Ralph F. Brown Act, Government Code 54, subsection 54950. In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that the public commissions, boards, and councils and other public agencies in this state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to these agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that may retain control over the instruments they have created. And with that, the meeting will now be called to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. And with that, Planning Manager Hannum, could we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Huey. She is absent, and she has an excused absence for today. Commissioner Uch.
Here.
Commissioner Lam-Julian.
Present.
Commissioner Bender.
Present.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Vice Chair Menes.
Here.
Chair Sandoval.
Present.
Let the record show that we have enough. We do have a quorum tonight, so we can take action on all the items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannum. And with that, we will move to citizens to be heard. The public may address the Planning Commission on items that are within its jurisdiction and not otherwise listed on the agenda. Planning commissioners may discuss the matter brought to their attention, but by the state law, the Ralph M. Brown Act, action must be deferred to a future meeting. Time allowed is 5 minutes each. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
Yes, Chair. I do see one person with a hand raised online. It's the caller with the phone number ending in 5748. When you're ready, please press *6 to unmute.
Thank you.
Oh, it looks like he might have accidentally hung up, so I guess we could give him a minute to get back on.
Do we have any other citizens to be heard online?
No, we don't have any other citizens to be heard online.
Does it look like, has the resident joined back again?
The caller still hasn't joined.
Let's give it, I think we should give it maybe a minute or so.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like, unfortunately, we do not have any citizens to be heard at this meeting at this time. Now we will move on to the meeting minutes. Are there any questions or clarification or comments from the commission on the meeting minutes?
Chair, I would like to, I have some corrections. Starting with page 10, is line 41. In that line sentence, where it says Brant Court Historic House, that had been, the had been should be replaced with was to be relocated. And then the next items relate over on page 4. It was lines 44 through 47. And on line 44, it should say ground floor parking for a residential multifamily building. And then on line 45, a scratch for multifamily, whether ground floor or subterranean. And leave with, and then one of should be stricken. It should say with the benefits of that approach, and then after that, striking having housing on top of a parking facility, although that would be, strike that whole, everything after the word approach on line 46, and insert being. And then on line 47, finally, reduce should be reduced surface parking and eliminating with the strategy and keeping should say, and allowing for more housing development and more public-private amenity spaces. If that is clear? Little,
It's clear to me. Is that also clear for staff as well?
thank you, Chair.
Of course, any other requests for edits?
I'd like to request that staff restate the proposed edit for us because I'm afraid I don't quite understand it myself.
I think we'll actually have to wait for the minutes taker to compile. And, yeah, clarify with the video too. But if you wanted to restate the edits, Commissioner Bender?
Okay, try to make it easy, going back to page 4.
Microphone.
Back to page 4. I'll actually start with the entire bullet point, and I'll read it as it should read, if that makes some sense.
Okay.
Exhibit A, Design and Development, number 27. Acknowledge agreement with the statement in principle, although a developer looking at the site would entertain providing a parking structure such as a ground floor parking for a residential multifamily building with the benefits of that approach being reduced surface parking and allowing for more housing development and more public-private amenities, spaces, et cetera.
Thank you for restating it that way. That definitely makes it clearer.
And then you also had a second edit, I believe, on page 10.
Yeah, on page 10, it was due on line 41 was to replace the words had been with was to be.
On which one?
That is the line 41. It said Commissioner Bender reported the Brant Court Historic House that was to be relocated from. And that's the extent of the change on that page.
Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
I definitely agree with that one. It's important to clarify that the property has not, in fact, been moved into Pinole, which the current text seems to indicate.
Any other corrections from other commissioners? And do we have a motion? I'll make a motion to pass the meeting minutes from the Planning Commission on September 8th with the corrections from Commissioner Bender.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Planning Manager Hannum, could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Uch,
Yes.
Commissioner Lane Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menace,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And with that, we will move to our public hearings. At the beginning, we do have a public hearing for tonight. At the beginning of the item, the chair will read the description of that item as stated on the agenda. City staff will then give a brief presentation on the proposed project or item. The commission may then ask staff for questions on that item. For those listed as public hearing, the chair will open the public hearing and will ask the applicant to make a presentation. Those in favor will have an opportunity to speak. Those opposed, as such, and there is an opportunity for rebuttal, but that does not apply to us tonight. The public hearing will then be closed, and the commission will then discuss the item amongst themselves and ask questions to staff. The commission will then vote to approve, deny, approve in a modified form, or continue the matter as a later date for a decision. The chair will announce the commission's decision and advise the audience of the appeal procedure. Please note that no public hearings will begin after 11 p.m. Items remaining on the agenda after 11 p.m. will be held over to the next meeting. And with that, we have the public hearing on the adoption of the resolution to recommend the safety and environmental justice elements of the general plan. Planning Manager Hannum, do we have a presentation or any information on this item?
Yes. Yes, we do, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to give a brief kind of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to our consultant, Noelle Anderson from MBI, who helped us put together these two elements. And so just kind of give you a background is that when we were 2 years or 3 years ago, when we were in the process of hiring a consultant for doing the housing element, there are some state laws that came into play regarding the safety element and the environmental justice element. And because we were updating our housing element, state law basically required us to update the safety element as well. And because we were updating two elements, state law required that then we have to have an environmental justice element. And so basically, because of the adoption of the three elements, or the writing of the three elements is state law requires us to have. And so we've brought that forward for you tonight to review. Just to kind of just give you a brief background of terms of general plans. They have required 8 elements: land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, and environmental justice. Now is a mandatory element. Cities and counties that have identified as disadvantaged community must also address environmental justice. Our general plans are organized in topics which are called elements, and there's no requirement that a general plan be organized into separate elements. A jurisdiction may organize its general plan in any format, and that's true. When the general plans were first coming out, they were just kind of one real big document. But when they came back out in the 70s, because there wasn't a whole lot, no one really knew what these things were going to make. But over the years, the general plan has gone into chapters. We call them chapters or elements, and so now you see them standard with the separate chapters for housing, separate elements, separate chapters for transportation, circulation, land use, noise, safety, and so that's evolved over the course of time. The safety element are 2 general plan elements that must be addressed by the City of Pinole, as required by state law. And state law requires jurisdictions to review and update their safety elements after the completion of the housing element update. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. So with that, because I'm going to turn it over, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Noelle Anderson from MBI to give her presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions of the commission after that.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannum.
Thanks, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. All right, let me share my screen with my presentation. And then I will begin. So thank you for that introduction, Dave. Appreciate the opportunity to summarize the work program for both the safety element update and then the environmental justice and health element. This presentation will entail a brief summary of the history that Dave already went over a bit, but I'll add additional context. We will discuss the statutory requirements for each element before diving into the safety element update itself and the environmental justice element. We'll summarize the received public comment at our latest outreach meeting and then be able to help answer questions as needed. But as Dave mentioned, essentially the safety element and the environmental justice element was in part of the larger work program associated with the housing element. As I'm seeing familiar faces, but this commission, so you may remember our presentations from a few years ago. Our housing element, the initial adoption, and some further revisions occurred in 2023. Our safety element and environmental justice and health elements were with staff and submittals for during October and March of 2023. Essentially, we had to pause the work program because of the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan update, and that was facilitated by Contra Costa County. And so the adoption of that deliverable is required before you adopt your safety element. So that was recently approved and incorporated by reference in your safety element, and I'll discuss that statutory requirement a little bit further in our presentation. And as that document was adopted recently, we restarted the work program to cover the safety element revisions to reflect the statewide wildfire hazard zone revisions as well. So essentially, your safety element is compliance with all of the latest regulations as we kind of constantly evolve, especially in terms of wildfire policy. We did conduct pretty significant community outreach on this deliverable as well. Component of it was grouped in with the housing element through the survey and some workshops in 2022. We did have some Planning Commission and City Council study sessions, along with our most recent outreach event. This was facilitated on August 27th, just to restart the program and make sure that everyone was aware of the availability of public review for this policy deliverable. I'll start with the statutory requirements for the safety element update. Essentially, the safety element's goal is to consider natural hazards as they affect land use and land use patterns. These are on our slide, the statutory requirements that our safety elements in California are required to address. Primarily, a lot of the regulatory changes were related to wildfire, kind of at the bottom, the wildland and urban fires. A summary of the statutory requirements and recent changes in those requirements is summarized on the screen. The most significant one I will flag for everybody is this AB 2140. And it's summarized as the LHMP integration. That's the integration of the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. By the city of Pinole incorporating that plan by reference, the city is eligible for 100% cost share from FEMA should a disaster that involves public assistance funding come into play. So if there is a disaster at a later date and a jurisdiction does not have this incorporation by reference per AB 2140, there is a 6% cost share with that public assistance funding. And I know that 6% might not necessarily sound like a large cost share, but sometimes with natural disasters where public assistance funding can range in the hundreds of millions of dollars, such as the recent LA wildfires, that 6% cost share can add up pretty significantly. So compliance in that area is critical just because of the financial component. Some updates that Dave mentioned earlier, the safety element updates when the housing element is revised. And our other component is the plan now evaluates some evacuation planning as it relates specifically to wildfire in Pinole. Then with the environmental justice element, like we mentioned earlier, this is a new statutory requirement. And the statutory requirement comes into play when two or more elements are updated at the same time. So as we were updating housing and safety, we needed to look at environmental justice as it applied to Pinole. As part of that environmental justice element, the list of statutory requirements is summarized below. Not only specific to pollution burden, but also some socioeconomic aspects as well, access to public facilities, food, safe and sanitary homes, physical activity, and civic engagement. The statutory requirements are summarized on this slide as well. The mandatory environmental justice element came through SB 1000, summarized what I just mentioned earlier. Our team also used the SB 115 state environmental justice definition to ensure compliance with the Cal EPA regulations as well, along with the SB 535 to help identify which communities in Pinole are considered socially vulnerable or environmental justice communities. The general plans are organized as followed. There are three primary sections, the introduction to outline the purpose of the general plan element and its legal basis before going into an existing condition summary. So for both the safety element and the EJ element, this exists as a baseline conditions assessment where we identify the current state of the community and then identify challenges that inform our goals, policies, and actions below. The goals, policies, and actions articulate the desired outcomes and measurable steps for future development. And this is organized by topic in both the safety and EJ elements. As sure many of the folks here know today too, goals are the kind of the broad aspirational statements for where Pinole wants to go into the future, whereas the policies kind of give that specific directive and outline the how behind the goal. And then very last is the actions. This is the concrete or specific step, or it's sometimes referenced as the implementation measure that puts the policy into practice. And with that, I will dive into the safety element update. This, as an existing component of your general plan, The update was relatively streamlined compared to the environmental justice element, which I'll discuss afterwards. But again, the primary and key update of this is the incorporation of the county's hazard mitigation plan by reference. And again, the financial incentive for doing so, the 100% cost share for public assistance should a natural disaster occur in Pinole. The other two items are the incorporation of the wildfire hazard zones that were recently released in March 2025, along with the evacuation routes. And I have some slides that outline that update here. So the wildfire hazard zones prior to this March included a fairly substantial, very high fire hazard severity zone within the city's jurisdiction. This also is a local responsibility area, meaning your local fire department would be responsible for putting out a wildfire or would take lead agency in an incident command scenario. The changes for Pinole were pretty unique compared to other jurisdictions. We went from having a smaller component of the city within the very high fire hazard severity zone to now having a larger component of the city in a hazard zone, but that hazard zone being moderate. So while there was an increase in risk and vulnerability just from a size perspective, that zone is the lowest hazard zone, moderate compared to very high. The good part about this change also is that your safety element is written to the standards of what is required of a very high fire hazard severity zone. So your safety element's really going above and beyond in terms of policy and helping keep people safe from wildfires as directed by best practices, not only from the state directives, but also from our CAL FIRE directives as well. And then following the wildfire component as well, our evacuation route study helped assess capacity and gave some preliminary information about how evacuation from a land use perspective could be evaluated and applied in Pinole. Probably to no one's surprise, your major evacuation routes are your arterials and your highways, providing egress to your highways and then out of the city kind of on the east-west sides as well on I-80. To supplement the identification of the evacuation routes, we also identified evacuation zones. This is for use of understanding capacity and timing with evacuation as a whole, and will help give directives for your public safety agencies to use in the future if desired. The evacuation zones were identified specifically to help evaluate in a GIS standpoint those neighborhoods with fewer than 2 points of egress. Again, from a land use planning perspective, this is more for information and awareness for those folks who live in these communities to be aware that they live in an area with limited egress. So should they receive evacuation orders, that should be communicated by your public safety agencies, as well as the fact that if an evacuation order is lifted, they should heed that and take that seriously. An important note is that your safety element and evacuation studies that supplement it, they are not meant to be directive or work in the component of an emergency plan or emergency operations plan, so to speak, really just helping inform risk and vulnerability from a land use planning perspective and helping build awareness that can be used by your public safety agencies should evacuation or further evacuation studies and emergency operations planning occur. And then last, the safety element, while I mentioned earlier, a lot of the policy directives were related to wildfire. Your safety element does cover all of the statutory requirements for safety elements, along with a few other ones as well. Drought and hazardous materials spills kind of expand upon what is typical in a safety element, along with highlighting the emergency plan and response component. And just to kind of summarize and give an idea of what's in the safety element, we kind of have our goals where we're reaching for a high level, minimize the potential for loss of life, and then our policy discussing wildfire, how we're going to accomplish that by integrating fire safe design for existing and new developments, or potentially for major renovations as well. And then this is where the action would come into play, is requiring new development proposals to show where egress and evacuation routes or emergency vehicle access would occur. as well as visible addressing and fuel modification. So that is an example of something that's required in the very high fire hazard severity zone and is highly recommended but not required yet in the moderate fire zones. Next is the environmental justice and health element. Like I mentioned, this was a new element of the general plan that we built in coordination with the outreach and input from city staff. However, that being said, the environmental justice element, it did rely on components from the previous health element. So using some existing policies that met the statutory requirement as outlined by environmental justice, we were able to integrate into these 4 category areas the key topics that meet all of the statutory requirements and enhance some organization for your policies. These topics outlined on this slide: equity and access, equity and environment, equity and civic engagement opportunities, and equity and generation. So those topical areas are outlined below, and there's policies that are responsive to each in each subsection. Now, the City of Pinol's environmental justice analysis was a bit unique, and I can explain further on the following slides. Essentially, this is the state's designation criteria for what constitutes a disadvantaged community, or you'll see sometimes referenced as an impacted community as well. What is unique about these census tracts as they apply to Pinole is that they're primarily located actually outside of the jurisdiction. So while we do have census tracts that are in the highest 25%, these are our census tract 3922 here, as well as census tracts identified by SB 535. These are the 3922 along with 3640. But like I mentioned, these census tracts are they're fairly small within the city of Pinole, and they're located on the city edges. And the majority of the jurisdiction is the majority of the jurisdiction of the census tract is located outside of Pinole. And in these cases, they're quite small in terms of the number of population we were able to estimate. For the first census tract, 3922, we were only able to we were able to estimate about 62 housing units because the total population, the census tract data didn't break down into a small enough area where we can specifically isolate the portion within Pinole. So we ultimately aren't aware of exactly how many people are living within this component of the environmental justice community. It could be, using the 62 housing units as an estimate. It could be within the realm of like 150 to 200 individuals. And similar with the other census tract, we were luckily able to isolate this data with census tract data. It's about 477 individuals in 143 housing units. So just to give an idea, the components of the population that are within a disadvantaged community as defined by the state, it is a small segment of the community, which is why goals and policies were built specifically to address these known issues within these communities, as well as reach the broader community as well, because we are all aware that environmental justice issues and other social vulnerability items do not necessarily respect the boundaries of a census tract, and they could occur outside of the designated zones. And people can either have the characteristics or conditions of social vulnerability for short periods or long periods while they're living in Pinole. So again, some of these policies were referenced in some of the policies that were built in the House or the previous health element, but others were created to respond to the specific requirements of the state legislation. Component of this one is referencing the statutory requirements: healthy food, public facilities, public transit. This one in particular was supporting educational programs and practices that improve public health, and references continued programming through the Parks and Recreation Department to encourage physical activity and recreational activities in the community. And then with that, I will summarize the public comments that we have received to date. We did host a public outreach meeting on August 27th. We did receive a few verbal questions during the outreach event. They were primarily related to the safety element. We didn't really receive any questions or comments on the environmental justice component. We fielded some questions about evacuation planning, about the regional coordination Pinole does with other jurisdictions regarding emergency preparedness, as well as there's a couple specific questions about dam inundation and how that risk was evaluated in the plan. The safety element. So after we facilitated this outreach event, there was the opportunity for folks to participate in a survey where they were able to provide some feedback on which policies in each element they felt were most important and most critical for us to adjust. These policies are shown on the slide for the safety element, but we have feedback that reducing the risk of crime, providing essential services during public health crisis, and wildfire were kind of the top three, as well as minimizing the risk to life and property through emergency preparedness. And then similarly, while we didn't receive verbal comments or feedback on the environmental justice element during the specific outreach event, we did get some feedback that these were the primary priorities received from the public, the top one being the equitable access to parks. We had some feedback on access to safe routes to school, recreational opportunities for children, as well as improving land use planning to minimize water quality pollution. And so the last item, we did receive some written comments provided through the survey. There was an open-ended question box where people could write their notes and feedback. The first item, I can give our responses to these comments as well. In our comment to the first item would be that generalities were for active transportation within this specific element that was purposeful, so the city can later decide on how and where infrastructure improvements can occur and be phased based on not only community needs but also funding availability. The second one, we did note that implementation of policies and not only the environmental justice element but also the safety element all use terminology that was given to us and directed by the state and staff guidance. So we're maximizing consistency with guidance as published by LCI was really our priority there. The number three, regarding the non-working storm drain in Dolores Court, we recommended that this comment is forwarded to Public Works for further clarity on this specific storm drain, but otherwise our safety element as a policy document doesn't get into this level of detail. It really is focused on providing land use directives and overall land use planning with the context of safety. And then our last one, the provision of sites to dispose household hazardous materials. This provision actually is included in the safety element under policy 2.3. It is numbered action 2.4.1. So in response to all of the public comment received, I am happy to pause there and pass the reins back to Dave, and I will be available to help answer any questions or receive any feedback on either the safety element or environmental justice element. Thank you.
Yeah, at this point, after the staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council for the safety and environmental justice elements. So basically, we want to try to open up the public hearing. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer the questions.
Yes, and that we will thank you so much for the presentation, and we'll open up the hearing for questions from the commission. I will start to my right with Commissioner Bender. Do you have any questions on the presentation?
Yes, I'm kind of curious in the safety element, under the hazardous materials, why pipelines aren't included in that? Because there are a series of pipelines here in Pinole. I know Chevron has 3 running near my area, and then there's, I believe, a Kinder Morgan one at the bay, paralleling the Union Pacific.
I am happy to answer that. So we usually see hazardous materials pipelines addressed in your countywide multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. For the context of these safety elements, we usually are not able to access data about the exact location of those pipelines, so it makes it challenging to derive policy directives from them. In addition to that they're owned by third-party entities, it does make it a little bit challenging just to include again, policy directives specifically about that. But that item is addressed in the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, and as that is incorporated by reference, that's the link between the two deliverables as it relates to that item.
Thank you. Chair, do we want to just also have comments at this point, or just leave it as questions?
Just questions at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if we could just concentrate on one element at a time, so we just do, since John started with the safety element, we could just do the safety element first and then go back and do the environmental justice element. That way we're not going back and forth between the
Okay,
two
sounds
elements.
good. Yes, we can do that. Commissioner Bender, did you have any other questions on the safety element? No. All right, Commissioner Utsch.
Hi, so I have a question. Sorry, we're going over the safety element, right?
Yes.
So on page 51 of the safety element, I just have a question in terms of under section 2.83, public safety services, specifically under fire services, where it mentions fire station 74, it says will be reopened. I'm pretty sure it's open now, right? Just as of to this date?
Yes, at the time, Confire hadn't opened the station at that point. So, but it is, it is open at this time. Yes,
Got
we
it.
can change that.
Oh, so it'll be changed? Okay, yeah, because I was reading over that, I was just like, oh, it's just open now, I see it every day.
Yeah, it'll be, because we're under a third-party contract with Confire, the station will be open. If and when if it comes back to the city, it could be closed again or that. So, but it is open now currently, so we can put that in the element.
Got it, thank you. And one other, I guess it's more of a comment, just above the same page under, in terms of talking about briefly the Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, you'll see, I think one of the words is spelled wrong. It says, I'll read it. The CERT program and conducting annual tabletop exercises and community drills as one of its strategies to, I think it's supposed to be satisfied because it's spelled STISFY. So I think that's just spelled wrong.
What page are you on again?
51. Just a misspelled word. I think it's supposed to be satisfied. Right after strategies 2, and you'll see it.
Okay, we can make that change.
Got it. And then, just out of curiosity, the CERT program, is that basically a agency, like a FEMA-like agency for Pinole, or is it like a community? Some sort of community program.
I'm happy to answer that if
yeah.
needed.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, CERT is CERT is a regional organization that that operates on a community basis. So FEMA and other public safety agencies do offer some directives on the training and what that goes over and how folks are certified. But essentially, the CERT program helps empower your local residents to take charge of their neighborhoods and help provide first aid or preliminary emergency response in the absence of a formal public safety agency should a major disaster occur.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. And that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. And Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Utsch. I guess what I'd like to know is Pinole in our structure, are we trying to be, and I may get the wording wrong in this, but I believe, Dave, Moraga might be a fire smart city. Is that similar to this CERT program? And are we not working toward better fire preparedness for our city? Where does that fall?
You mean the CERT program? I mean, it's just something the city hasn't had. It says that, and of course I wasn't here prior to 2019. So the CERT programs, as Noel, that's the county thing that would train individuals. We just haven't had that. We haven't implemented that plan. So we would have to rely on the feds and the state and the county to help us create that plan, to create those individuals that would go out and do that. Are we still doing fire safety? Yes, part of the element, there are policies and programs in there that would help us become more fire smart, fire safe. Also, the building codes are also changing as well to make us more fire safe as well. So those policies they're in the document. I don't know, Well, if you could help me with that one, because I know I saw them.
Sure, and like I mentioned too, so the safety element doesn't specifically reference something like a FireWise program or other, like, I know that there's a multitude of programs that the city can participate in to get certified and be acknowledged as a community that's actively working to reduce fire risk. The safety element does include policies related to wildfire preparedness under policy SE 1.8. But again, the majority of these policies were written prior to the change in wildfire hazard severity maps. So the safety element is going a bit above and beyond where required, because with the new mapping in the moderate zones, there are no specific requirements as it relates to the safety element policies for moderate zones yet. That might change soon as this wildfire policy is constantly evolving. And as Dave mentioned too, the building codes are changing, and there's other moving pieces as well in the regulatory environment specifically related to wildfire. So compliance in this arena is just one component of that larger picture.
And also in policies 1.10, which we coordinate with regional agencies on wildfire programs. So that's another. And then we have action measures that would help do that, as well as. As part of one of the acts, just to kind of give you an example, one of the actions, 111.5, reduce the risk of fire hazards by working with homeowners associations, business parks associations, and the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District to maintain fire retardant landscaping and buffer zones. So that's kind of what that CERT program does, but it just kind of gives, we do have actions and policies that would go in that direction.
Excellent. I appreciate the clarification and additional information on that. Mm-hmm. Then my second item that I wanted to discuss is on page 81, and it's the safety element number 53, the map.
81 of 165?
Correct. Or on the safety element number 53. When I'm looking at the escape routes, Planning Manager Hannum, I do not see and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that we opened a connector between Pinole and El Sobrante to be used in wildfires or other emergencies up on Galbraith and Rancho Road. There's a little section that runs between the two that could be used as an escape route, and I was under the impression, it's locked right now, but in the event of an emergency, someone runs up, unlocks it, and gets those cars through there. Was that considered, and is that still part of our safety plan, or am I wrong?
Well, it's still part of the plan. However, when we look at the evacuation routes, we're looking at the major thoroughfares. Okay. Now, depending on where the fire is, depending on where it is, there are a couple accesses that could be used, like down in the valley between Hercules, and there's a little road that goes, between Hercules and Pinole. There's also the Galbraith and out that way, but those aren't really included because those are, well, one, we're not going to be sure at the time that the fire's there those roads are going to be there in terms of maintenance, in terms of how they are, if we can get out, or that by using our main evacuation routes, that's what we're going to be using to mostly get people out, because by identifying now the evacuation zones, we will allow people to get out during our major thoroughfares. If we can't, then yes, but it'll all be based on the circumstance of the fire and and where the fire is and how do we get people out. So there'll also be a whole major, I mean, this is just part of our element. If there was an incident, county ops, con fire, all the other fire departments would be involved in terms of, and all the other jurisdictions, would be involved in trying to get those, and then that emergency operations plan would be put into place. So we're just looking at from a policies perspective is where are our major evacuation routes? Pinole Valley Road, of course, Highway 80. Those are our major roads of access. So all the little ones that are out there, I mean, there could be little connections here and there. We didn't include every single one of them just because, one, we don't know where they're all at. I mean, everyone might know where they're all at, but we might not know. And the fire department would determine on which of those routes would be used as part of an emergency operations plan. So we just included the major evacuation routes for the city that would be used.
And thank you for that, Dave. But one would think, because this is such a critical component of it, that we somehow get the information out that Galbraith does exist. And let's just say hypothetically, throwing a hypothetical out there, there was a major earthquake, 80 went down, and we had to get all the residents out of Pinole and over to another area, right? I think it's important that whether it's the road you referenced into Hercules or the Galbraith Road, that we do take note and get that information out to the community, because there are a number of people in this community that have lived here a very long time that have no idea that those exit routes exist, right?
Right, but those aren't necessarily, I mean, not to say those routes aren't important because it's all going to pertain to the situation at hand, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a fire, whether it's in terms of evacuation routes. And so in most cases, those routes would be used in the most dire of emergencies. In most emergencies, our major evacuation routes will be able to get us out if we follow the emergency operation plans of the agencies that are providing it at the time of the incident. Okay. So, and not to say that in an earthquake that we might need that little dirt road that gets us from one place to another. I think that's going to be more of a decision for Confire or another agency that would say, yes, we need to get you out of there. The other thing is a lot of that is also third party. I don't know who owns that property. So for those roads might be there, those accesses might be there, but are we crossing third parties? Are there other properties? Are there other easements? Do we have all the easements to use those roads in an emergency? So those are things, that's why when you're doing an element, remember this is a general plan. It's general in nature. And so we're using our major evacuation routes right now. If we get into an event and we need those extra routes, I'm sure Confire will open up the gates or whoever has the keys to those gates, whether it's Confire or the county, it could be the flood protection. It could be any one of those regional agencies that have control over those access roads. Then at that point, they would shuffle traffic out that way. And those roads really they're not meant to handle big loads of traffic. So that's the other part is those aren't, Pinole Valley Road, that if you're going one way, you could use all 4 lanes in certain areas and get everybody out. Those roads are probably one car, one time, going up a little road. I mean, I don't know exactly where they're at. I've heard of the one in Galbraith. I've heard about the one between Hercules and that. Whereas these other roads can get traffic out a whole lot faster. And so that's kind of why that's why those are included as part of the safety element.
Thank you for your insight. Much appreciated. Those are my final questions. Chair, thank you.
Yes, Vice Chair Menace, you had something specific to add to this, or?
Yes, with response to Commissioner Martinez's comment, I wanted to draw the Commission's attention to page 63 as it's paginated of a safety element, page 91 of 165 in our agenda packet. Action SC 1.9.10. Construct an emergency access road extending Galbraith Road to South Rancho Road and a fire access gate to be opened by emergency responders and explore the possibility of making this a permanent public road. So it is listed as an explicit, point of information in our actions. Just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
Okay. So page 48, well, first question, Was this presentation that we received right now the same that the public received?
Yes.
On the 27th? This,
Except for the last few slides outlining the responses from the surveys.
okay. And then page 48, I want to say there was like a Flamingo Cleaners that, in the same shopping, the Safeway shopping, so there used to be 2 dry cleaners there. Because they closed and they had a second location in Berkeley.
If I may, so are you referencing table 7 under the hazardous materials sites?
Yes.
Yes, so that database is intended to be a snapshot in time from data reported by GeoTracker and the State Department of Toxic Substances Control. Not meant to be an exhaustive or inclusive list of every past and previous and future releases within the city. So as it's cited on March 15, 2022, this data was pulled a little bit ago. That was just intended to provide some context of what the typical hazardous materials users are in the city, and just acknowledging the types and less the specific locations, just for awareness within the community. Not every dry cleaners comes up as an issue on either of those databases, so it's possible that there's additional ones that exist in Pinole and haven't been flagged for accidental release.
Okay, super. And then to speak on regarding CERT, I think last time I checked, where we had the fire hazard report from Confire, they noted, I think Terra Hills was the closest that we're looking for volunteers to participate in the program. And I mentioned that because on page 68, policy SE 3.1, create programs, just thinking and just suggesting, instead of creating programs from scratch, to partner up with local CERT programs like Terra Hills. I know that Concord has a safety and preparedness fair. Alameda County just has theirs. So not necessarily developing and creating a program from scratch, but just bringing their awareness and tapping into those resources and events that are already there, and highlighting it for the community as an ongoing conversation. I am complete.
Did we lose the presenter?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that CERT, the intention behind that policy was to, intentionally be broad and not pigeonhole into specific program or specific name, and definitely not to reference creating something from scratch. I think highlighting the existing CERT programs is an excellent idea. And thank you for that feedback.
And then what about kind of tying into, was it Alameda? They just had their preparedness fair over the weekend, and I know Concord had theirs about a month or two ago, where they kind of showcase it's almost like it's a national night out, but something along those lines, and have those conversations ongoing, I think would probably be a good strategy.
Yeah, and there's language in here about participating in like Contra Costa County programming and resource sharing. So things like community outreach and educational awareness programs would definitely be included under that.
Okay, thank you. I'm complete.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Menace, your questions on the safety element.
Certainly. So I have a few comments. I'll reserve those for later. With regards to my questions, let's see. So this is sort of a multi-part question. On page number 17, as it's paginated in the element itself, page number 45, looking at figure number 6, landslide areas, we see a pretty substantial portion of the city's overall developed or developable land area falls into landslide suspectability classes of 8 or higher, and on a 0 to 10 scale. And I know that, let's see if I can find the specific policy. There was something referencing basically don't have development in areas that were subject to landslide risks. Where was it? I suppose that the policy SE 1.2 doesn't explicitly forbid building in high erosion areas, but there was something, maybe it was in the text of the document itself.
Are you looking towards the seismic activity and geologic instability section, the policies and action measures within those areas?
Or is it flooding and erosion?
I was looking under policy SE 1.2, control and minimize the impact of flooding and erosion,
Okay.
because I figured that's where stuff talking about landslides would be most likely.
And if I may, our policies are definitely not intended to prohibit development, really just to prohibit development where it is objectively unsafe to do so. So there's a multitude of mitigation actions that can be integrated into design and development at the project proposal phase that can make it safe to develop in any hazard zone, really, with probably the exception of flood. But with regard to seismic, with regard to landslide, wildfire, and that's where our policy language really is trying to outline that if there is a proposal in an area where there's a known hazard risk, there's a responsibility for that risk to be reduced as much as logistically feasible.
All right, thank you. And my next question. So on page number 35, as it's paginated of the element, page number 63 of 165 in the agenda packet, it says the CAAP is fully integrated into safety element. I'm assuming that's supposed to read into the safety element, but does that mean it's incorporated by reference like the county hazard mitigation plan was implemented? Or
correct.
Okay.
Oh, yes, and we did tier a couple of policies off of findings and recommendations from the CAAP as well.
Okay. Let's see. On returning to page 51, as paginated, page 79 of 165 in the agenda packet. And this isn't the only case where it shows up. There's a few instances. It says, it should be noted that Fire Station 74 is located in a very high fire hazard severity zone. That's no longer accurate. We also have a few other instances throughout the document where we're referencing the very high fire hazard severity zone. So do we just delete those sentences? Do we change them to be past tense because it was located in that zone?
We'll need to change those we'll keep the policies and the action measures that we've included, but in terms of the narrative and the background, we will change it to represent that Station 74 is open and it's operational. And it's within the fire, whether it's in the moderate or very high zones as well. So we want to keep the policies because that was part of the, as Noel was explaining, when we first did the element, we put together the policies and action items to reflect of being in a very high severity zone, which I think we want to keep, but we can change the narrative again to reflect that we are in the moderate, that we were moved out of the very high in some areas of the city and moved back to moderate, and that needs to be reflected in the narrative. In the background.
And I think I may have asked this question before. It's more of a broader question. Some of the data sources in this document, I guess you could probably fairly say a majority of the sources are linked to 2022 data, and it's currently 2025. Is there any way we can sort of reconcile the data, or is that simply not feasible?
I'll refer to Noel on that, since they were the ones that hit all the sources for this.
Yeah, unfortunately, because just due to the timing of the document preparation and the contracted scope of services. Our original scope didn't anticipate the pause for the hazard mitigation plan. So just due to the time of the kind of pause in the work program, the data is unable to be revised without kind of additional scope and fee.
Okay. So then moving on to questions within the goals, policy, and action items on page number 60 as paginated within the element, page number 88 of 165 as of the agenda packet. And there's a few instances of this. I'm just going to highlight the first one. Action SE 1.3.5 says pursue funding for adequate protection from sea level rise and subsidence. How is adequate defined? Who defines it?
That would be defined at a later date by specific infrastructure projects directed by Public Works. So adequate was intentionally used to be broad and not direct specific action as sea level rise, at least from the feedback that we received from Public Works and staff, that sea level rise is one of the most expensive things to kind of structurally engineer around and plan for. So we were intentionally broad there.
So I guess this is maybe more of a question for staff then. What is the city considering to be adequate?
I'd have to talk to the Public Works Department at this point. Because that was one thing that we weren't sure where we were going to go with this, because sea rise hasn't really affected us too much, at least to this point. And with a lot of the studies that are coming out, a lot of it is long range in the next 30 or 40 years where it'll more affect us. So it was more of, we need to stay on top of it, and we need to make sure that we include it in some of our operation, and that they need to keep it in some of their operational plans, especially in the wastewater area, since our plant is right there on the bay. So it's kind of a monitoring from that standpoint, in which case then capital projects can be derived from to be able to protect the water or protect us from sea rise. So that's kind of where it was left. And so we wanted to make sure we had policies in there that basically said that we need to make sure that we pursue funding with adequate protection from sea level rise. We haven't done I don't think I should say we haven't, but I don't think Public Works has done the studies to see what would be affected during sea rise, and then the timetable of when those proposals or when those projects would be done. So that's something that is going to be ongoing as we continue forward.
The reason that I asked that is because not just the Molly Reservoir stuff, but there was something. Right. So basically, like going back a few pages here. So to page 33 in the pagination, page 61 of 165 in the agenda packet, you have table number 3, which shows basically a low risk aversion and a medium high risk aversion of, basically percentage probability that sea level rise exceeds certain levels. Right. So I'm wondering whether we could be more specific and say, like, for example, adequate means meeting the low risk aversion, meeting the medium high risk aversion, meeting it by 2050, meeting it by 2100. Like, can we be more concrete, since we have this table and we have these estimates about just what adequate actually means, while still, remaining general enough for a general plan?
I would, at this phase so a couple of items. If you see figure 13 below, the city of Pinole is seeing, you're seeing impacts of sea level rise at that 66-inch level. And that's really where we're seeing the impacts of sea level rise for the city compared to some of these lower estimations, the 1.1, 1.9 feet, just due to the geography and topography of the city's coastline. These tables are provided from Coastal Commission, again, without like a definition of say the term adequate, because that can mean lots of different things for different infrastructure. So some infrastructure that's easily adjustable or easily replaced or rebuilt in another location, that may be, it may be acceptable or adequate to build to the low risk aversion, whereas the medium high risk aversion might be appropriate for infrastructure that can't be moved or can't be adjusted. So that was the findings and kind of recommendations from policies that are regional as applicable by Coastal Commission as incorporated in this plan.
Okay, so if I understand that right, you're saying that basically that's controlled by the Coastal Commission's language.
And the Bay's kind of local regional coordination agency that governs specifically on the coastline there. But like I was mentioning too, in Figure 3, that sea level rise impacts aren't really based on current projections. They're not seen until we get to sort of the 66 inches level.
All right, and then moving back to policies again. So on page 63, as paginated in the item itself, page 91 of 165 in the agenda packet, action SE 1.9.10 that I mentioned earlier. I think that the city has implemented at least part of this policy. Can we expand on that maybe? Like saying how far we've made progress on doing this, because I know a lot of this was probably written back in 22, 23 when that work hadn't been done yet.
We can see, I'll check with Public Works to see how much of it's been built. And we might be able to modify that action to just say complete the remainder, construct the remainder of the emergency access road. So I'll have to check with Public Works to see if anything, how much of that road has been built. If it hasn't been built or there isn't, if it's very a minor part, then I'm just going to leave that policy where it is, since there would be. But I'll check with Public Works to see where they're at in terms of constructing that road and extending.
Yeah, because I know that's been a point of concern for some community members as well. On the next page, so 64 in the packet, 92 of 165 in the agenda packet, action SE 1.11.4, the one that says where feasible, require all development to be located out of the very high fire hazard severity zone and maintain certain defensible space and so on and so forth. Is this action still necessary given that the city doesn't have very high fire hazard severity zone within its boundaries at the time of this element?
Yeah, we can eliminate this policy.
Well, I'm not necessarily, we should eliminate the entire policy. I'm just talking about that particular action, to be clear. I think the other.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. We can eliminate
Yeah.
action SC 1.11.4, excuse me.
Okay. Let's see.
Commissioner Martinez.
Are we sure we want to take that out? May I ask a question to Planning Manager Hannum?
Yes.
I'm not so sure that we want to take that out, Dave. If I remember right, you and I, we had a question, or I had some questions regarding, there's properties up and above Pinole, way, way high up, that a few years ago, the properties were being listed, and they're very, very big parcels of the hills for $3 or $4 million for acres and acres. And I'm not so sure that we want to take this out, because in doing so might remove some of the requirements that the city has to work with the owner of that parcel to ensure that they keep and maintain the clearing of the brush up in those areas. Planning Manager, can you speak on those parcels?
Are we talking about the four that, as you go up Silver Creek Road? Yeah, there's like 4 of them up there. Yeah. Most of those parcels right now, in terms of from a development perspective, they're about as developed as they're going to get in terms of the zoning and where they're at right now. Is that area, if you could can you pull up the fire map again, Noel?
Sure, give me one moment.
Okay.
And while Noel's pulling that up, it's sort of a follow-up to my question. If we want to maintain this language, would it be possible to modify it to be a requirement on moderate fire hazard severity zones rather than very high, given recent state adjustments to require zone 0 and various other zoning and fire hazard risk areas.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to keep the action, what I would recommend, and you want to keep the language as I was looking through it, if we just say should development be located in the moderate severity zone, then they must maintain certain dispensable space. Everyone's going to need to, no matter what zone you're in, you're going to need to keep dispensable space around your property. So yeah, if you look at the it's all in yellow. If you look at where the city limit line is, you can kind of see the outline of the valley. It's all moderate behind it. So technically, yeah, it's very high. We could probably take that whole policy out, but to maintain of what we're doing right now, we could just change some of the language to take out the very high, put moderate in there, and still they must maintain certain defensible space through specific field modifications, brush clearing requirements as obtained, outlined. Now, I don't know if we can use with the government code, because that government code is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Noel, the government code is consistent with the very high severity zone. So we'd have to take the government code section out, and the current building and fire code, or we can probably keep and to be built to the current California building and fire code. But we'd probably need to take the government code section out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, correct. That would be our plan of action.
Okay. So if you wanted to maintain the language, we could do that. We could just say, should development be located in the moderate fire hazard severity zone, then they must maintain certain defensible space through specific field modification, brush clearing requirements as outlined, and required to be built to the current building code and fire code. Would that be acceptable to the commission?
That would satisfy my need for that concern area, if that would be okay with Vice Chair Menace.
I'm okay with that, but I think we should table modifications for right now because we're still going through questions.
Okay, thanks.
So then moving on to page 66, as paginated in the item itself, page 94 of 165 in the agenda packet. Under crime policy SC 2.1, action SC 2.1.3 talks about maintaining and expanding where feasible the network of surveillance cameras in the community to discourage and help investigate criminal activity based upon all police department advice and experience. Is there some way we can either modify that action or add an additional action to account for the security of that network of surveillance cameras? Because if malicious actors are able to get access to that surveillance network, I'm pretty sure they could use that for, things we do not want to see happen.
Would that be in the scope of this document?
That's where I would defer to city staff as just a note that this crime subsection is not statutorily required per your safety element. So there were some existing policies that we retained and worked with the police department and staff to expand. But it was primarily not the focus of the scope of work, as the safety element's primary goal is to address natural hazards, not human caused.
So what type of action would you be looking at to add?
I guess
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
when we're saying maintain and expand, it sounds like our primary priority for that action is to have as large a network as possible without regard to the security implications of that network.
Can I just add the word secure in there? Maintain, expand, and secure where feasible?
I think that would help, yeah, because at least that creates the expectation of it being a secure network, which I don't think we're even stating right now. Sorry, I know that's more of a comment, but.
Okay. And
then moving on. So on the second to last page of the safety element, page 69, as it's marked within the element, page 97 to 165 of the agenda packet, action SE 3.1.5 talks about explore restoring the CERT program and conducting annual tabletop exercises and community drills. Going off of Commissioner Lamb Julian's earlier comment, would it be possible to expand this action to link into existing community CERT programs?
Well, we wouldn't be acting on other people's CERT programs. We would develop our own program. But we would be using probably, we wouldn't be reinventing a wheel. We'd be borrowing from other cities, their actions and their type of programs and their tabletop exercises to do that. So, from my perspective, I think if we just keep it the way it is right now, it would just be regarding our CERT program for the city of Pinole. And then we would probably use other agencies' programs and policies to help create our own, to modify and then help create our own, and then conduct the annual tabletop exercises and community drills.
Yeah. If I may, CERT is a nationwide program with a preset curriculum. So by restoring the CERT program, it would be inherently relying on the basis of nationwide curriculum that's already produced and recommended, and that includes the tabletop exercises and other drills that they practice as part of the certification process.
Right, but I guess this is maybe more of a thing that Commissioner Lamb Julian can follow up on later if she likes, but it sounded to me as though there were some existing programs relatively nearby to the city of Pinole that we could, at the very least, learn from, if not, actively work with.
Well, yeah, and we would do that as part of the policy. We would explore restoring the CERT program using those other agencies as well as the curriculum, like Noel was saying, using the national curriculum and the tabletop exercises with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got to look at a couple of those, and they're probably very similar if they're based off the federal CERT program standards and specs. They'd probably be very similar, except for probably they'd have their own cities nuances in some regards, but majority of it would probably be related to the federal program.
And if I may, this policy too, there are some cities who facilitate partnerships through their CERT program, so it's not unusual for maybe 2, 3, 4 cities to host a CERT program where participants can come from the jurisdictions as part of that partnership. So by keeping this policy as it is, it allows for maximum flexibility. If that's what police department thinks is most valuable, is to facilitate a partnership, then they can do that. Or if it's easier for them to facilitate it on their own and perhaps coordinate with a smaller cohort of participants, that's on the table too.
Okay, well, that's all of my questions with regards to the safety element.
Thank you, Vice Chair Menace. Thank you so much for the presentation. Most of my questions have already been answered. I did have one other question around the evacuation routes, and this would be on page 54 of the safety element, page 82 of the agenda packet. On the map of the neighborhood of access to evacuation routes, I was just a little bit concerned about, in the valley, there's residential areas that have less than 2 evacuations route, and I was wondering if there's anything that could be done to mitigate those concerns, or potentially how would the city or any sort of emergency services get into the valley if there's basically only one road being used as that evacuation route. Would, for example, if there was a fire coming in the valley from either the north or the east or northeast, would emergency services kind of use alternate routes, or would they also be using the evacuation route?
They would probably be using any route possible that they would have, depending on the nature of the fire or the nature of the incident. I shouldn't say fire because it could be other incidences. But just showing that we have our primary routes. Again, if we they would probably have a handle on the operation once they solidified what the issue is, where they have evacuations. There'll also be, because this is the first time Pinole has had actually evacuation zones. So it's on the next page, you kind of see the E zones, like E009, E010. Now they also now have a better way of, if depending on the incident, to be able to evacuate areas that are needed to evacuate. So it's not maybe you need to evacuate E9 and E8, but the rest of the city is okay. So, or that's a bad one. Let's say you have to evacuate E11 and E12. Well, we know that you're probably not going to be able to go south on Pinole Valley Road. You're probably going to all have to go north. So it allows like when they do the notifications, it allows people to go at their rate, because there's usually a warning and then there's get out, right? So, there's usually 2-3 step process before they want you all out of there. So it gives you, by establishing the zones, then by establishing the routes, it allows us to give us some coordination. But I'm sure EOP plans of the fire department and Department of Emergency Services of the county would then kick in, and so would have a much broader spectrum of the total area, not just Pinole, but areas outside of Pinole, and how to get people from one place to another. And if we find out that Galbraith is one of those, we might be able to pull Galbraith in, depending on how much is constructed there. So I mean, there's some other ones. I mean, I think Commissioner Bender told me of one on the north side, out by the plant out there, connecting Hercules and Pinole. So there's probably little spots over the course of over decades that have been able to get people out, in and out. And I think if there was an incident, I mean, and I've been in a community where there's been incidences, the Department of Emergency Operations are locked in. I mean, they know where usually everything's at in the county in most places, and they use the local jurisdictions. Fire department, which in our case would be Con Fire, or our police department, public safety, would know of these other outlets that would allow people to get out and be able to get those people out. I don't, and maybe Noel, you can also assist me on this. I don't know. I mean, if we want to just start, I don't think by adding all these little outs. The other thing is, we don't want to get, if we do put these in and you can't get out, we got a problem. So I think by using our major highways and byways that we have in our community, and by, depending on the department, the emergency operation plan and the Department of Emergency Services, if an event were to happen in and around the Pinole area, would kick into play. I think and the addition of the emergency areas that we didn't have before, I think it'll lend itself to, I mean, I can't answer for everything, but I mean, at least it gives us a much better coordinated effort if there's an event in the valley. So I think the valleys, I mean, up in the north, I mean, you got access areas all over. You got Marlesa, you can get out. You got Terra Hills. You got, besides the highways and byways, but in terms of the valley, it's pretty much Pinole Valley Road. I mean, that's pretty much the major out. And so, so depending on the evacuation and when those areas are to be used, I think we'd have to probably defer to Department of Operations or Emergency Operations at that point.
Sounds good. Thank you for clarifying. That's all the questions for me. Are there any other questions on the safety element? Vice Chair Menace.
Just wanted to follow up with regards to your question, Chair Sandoval, and draw people's attention to scenario 1 on page 58 of the item itself, page 86 of 165 of the agenda packet, which discusses basically fire in the valley evacuation zones 9, 8, 10, 11, and 12. And we should probably order those numerically rather than having 8 after 9. But so it talks about basically people abandoning their vehicles and walking across city limits at the terminus of Galbraith Road. So I think we may need to update that depending on the current status of the improvements there.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. It's also a hypothetical scenario. It's not exactly an emergency operations plan. But sure, we can update that language. Any other questions? All right, and with that, we'll go to public comment specific to the safety element. Do you have any public comment online?
I don't see any speakers currently on, or callers currently on.
Okay, so with that, we'll bring it back to the commission for comments. I think that it may be best to handle them one at a time, and then we can do one motion at the end approving the resolution for both the safety and the environmental justice element. So with that, Commissioner Martinez, do you have any other comments? None. Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
None, thank you.
Vice Chair Menace.
I have a few comments, yes. Let's see, there was one point. So again, referring back to page 35 in the packet itself, 63 of 165 in the agenda packet, the word "the" should be inserted in between "into" and "safety."
I'm sorry, on what page? On page 35?
Yeah, the very last sentence on that page.
Okay.
On page number 51, so page 79 of 165 in the agenda packet, there's a few typographical changes that should be made to the first paragraph. It says Pinole currently, that's a capital C, it should be lowercase c. And then there's this sentence segment, has called out to exploring restoring the CERT program. The tenses there don't work. I don't know whether it should be worded as has called out exploring restoring the program, or has called out an intent to restore it or whatnot, but the to form and the present perfect form of exploring just reads oddly. Let's see. And then we already went over the removal of the sentence on Fire Station 74 on that page. I think that's all my comments. I think I addressed most of mine during the questions phase, frankly.
Sounds good, and thank you. And Commissioner Bender.
There's one item that's on page 28, but it's page 56 of 165. And it's a minor, it doesn't change the overall scope of the report, but it's under the dam inundation, and it's in the middle of the last paragraph, and it says Maloney Reservoir is a recreational, artificially impounded body of water. As we had discussed in the subcommittee meeting, that reservoir actually is not recreational. It's a covered facility, and the gates are locked, and it doesn't show up as a recreational opportunity or facility in the East Bay Municipal Utility District website. And my only other comment is it's kind of ironic. The Hayward fault early this morning reminded us of what this is all about. That's it.
Commissioner Utch.
None.
All right, and comments from myself regarding some of the specific policies, specifically action SC 1.11.4 on 64. I would actually prefer that we kind of leave the intent of this language. And that would be because a lot of CalFire and ConFire can change how they categorize the city, and I don't think that we should remove this entirely. But I would be opening to amending it in a way so that way parcels or areas that are a bigger fire risk, specifically out in the valley, have some sort of way to have some sort of way where the city can kind of say, oh, here is where, using vague language, of course, we can encourage fire mitigation or defensive space throughout kind of the valley in general. Just kind of thinking of if potentially a wildfire were to come from that part of the city, a lot of those parcels that are specifically between the urban wildland interface, I think those should be those ones should actually have pretty strict fuel breaks and mitigation. So I'd be a little bit wary of removing that, but I would be open to amending that. And then the other one, Action SC 2.1.3, this was the one that Vice Chair Menace had mentioned about the security of the network, I believe. I think that if we just have it, just add a secure network, I think that might address some of your concerns with that specific policy.
I think to follow up on that, though, right now, the way the policy action is worded is just maintain and expand the network, and it doesn't really say anything about whether or not the network is secure. If we say the secure network, that implies we know which parts of the network are secure and which are not, which I don't think that we do, frankly, at the present time, and that we're willing to take accountability for those segments remaining secure. So I don't think just adding the word secure before network is necessarily the right modification to this action. I think that adding secure after maintain and expand, so have it be maintain and expand and secure, would help, because that way it's an ongoing obligation and it doesn't imply that we know things that we don't.
Right, but I don't necessarily think that if you add the word secure after network, it's kind of saying that we're not necessarily that we don't know the flaws in the network, but just kind of saying that we want to keep a secure network. I just think adding secure to the end of that makes it too wordy.
If I might add, so right now where it says maintain and expand, the way it was brought forward first was to maintain, expand, and secure where feasible the network of surveillance cameras in the community to discourage to help investigate criminal activity based on Pinole Police Department advice and experience. So what you're saying is that you don't want to secure there, you want to secure in front of network, or do you want some type of wording after the word network regarding the surveillance cameras?
I was thinking towards after having the word secure right before network, because I think having maintain, expand, and secure, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
So I think potentially we could rephrase that. Yes, Commissioner Martinez.
As an example, I think what you're saying, you're onto something, and I've actually worked with a number of the three-letter agencies in my career, so I'm glad that you called this out. This is extremely important stuff that you're saying, and so I like your idea that we should maintain, expand, and secure. Not where feasible. Dump that whole not where feasible. the network of surveillance so take out where feasible, remove that, the network of surveillance cameras, and continue it to the end. Then really highlighting the goal of this would be ensuring the appropriate security protocols are administered. Would be the best way to address not only the security cameras, but the network infrastructure that it rides on to deliver the information. So if we're calling out saying that they must follow the appropriate security protocols, we'll ensure we have from end, the cameras where they start, to the end where they're delivering that data to the data center at the police center. If that would be agreeable changes to that.
I would be agreeable to that, yes. Vice Chair Menace.
I definitely think that adding the point about the security protocols are administered would also be helpful here. And I do, continue to maintain that having it just be maintained, you could have it be maintain, comma, expand, comma, and secure if you don't want to have two ands in there. But I think that the addition of basically one punctuation mark and possibly one word on net is, I guess, let me try and explain why I have an issue with saying the secure network specifically. When we're saying the secure network, we're implying several things. We're implying that a network exists right now, which, we're already applying with the existing action item, but we're also implying that that network is secure to some standard. What standard exactly, we don't state. But there's a difference between saying that something is secure and we need to make something more secure. One is a state of being, the other is an action. And I think that since we're looking for actions here, that it's appropriate to maintain the action focus of security, especially since, this is under a crime element.
I'm not exactly sure if I follow.
So, sorry, this is maybe getting a bit philosophical, but when we're saying maintain, expand, and secure the network, we're creating an instruction for an action to be taken that's ongoing over time. We're saying not only do we need to keep the network as it is, not only do we need to try and expand the network where we can, but we also need to make sure that it's secure. If we just say maintain and expand where feasible the secure network, that means, well, it has a couple different problems with it. First, it might mean that we're only expanding the network that we know to be secure, which means we would be cut off from the insecure network. Secondly, it implies that we know which networks are secure and which are not. And thirdly, I don't think it creates the ongoing obligation to maintain security in the same way as my suggested wording does.
Right, but I think that if the secure network is implied, right? Because we would expect that the city would have a secure network, not that we're trying to specifically say that we want to maintain a secure network. I think that it's implied within the language.
If we were just talking about city-controlled cameras, I might agree with you, but the scope of this action is broader. It's talking about the network of surveillance cameras in the community, which I assume doesn't just include city-owned cameras, but also includes things like Ring doorbells and other sources of surveillance data that the police can ask for access to.
Right, but we would only have jurisdiction over the city cameras, not any other. The private cameras, we wouldn't have any jurisdiction over that either.
If I may jump in as well, city security cameras that are implemented by the municipal police department are monitored by the police department. There are already policies and protocols put in place that are likely applicable to such an action. The they usually don't derive their directives for action based on the city's safety element. And like I mentioned earlier, this crime section in its entirety is a completely optional and not statutorily required component of the safety element. The intention of the safety element is to address natural hazards, not human-caused hazards, where crime would be included as that. So while I completely understand the nuance in wanting to be as correct as possible, I also want to caution that by getting too specific in this policy, we could be stepping on toes of other directives that we may not be aware of, just because, again, the security of these systems don't derive their security directives from something like the safety element.
I guess I would also note that at least part of the role of the goals and policies and even the actions in the safety element is to be aspirational, to say, the city wants to do this. Like the very next policy, strive to provide an on-scene response to emergency incidents of the city within 5 minutes. The city isn't going to always be able to do that, but it wants to try. It has that in there as action to work towards. So I think if we're talking about an action to work towards with regards to a network of surveillance cameras in the community, that we shouldn't just be talking about maintaining and expanding that network, but that we should also be talking about securing it.
Yes, I can agree with the security. I just think we should be using security as a descriptor of the network.
Except part of the reason why secure needs to be added onto the list of tasks here, in my opinion, is that the network as it exists isn't secure, most likely.
If I may interrupt here real quickly, if you would like, especially since this particular action measure is causing some issues, if there's some language that needs to be added, you probably could take a vote of the commission to see which language would be acceptable to that policy. So, so either by a straw vote or, even a motion for that particular action item. So that, because I see there's differences of opinion, and so it'd be taking action of the commission to decide which of those difference of opinions would take precedent. So I would recommend that either somebody either take a straw vote, Mr. Chair, or take even a vote on what that particular, because since this item is very tricky, and there could be some other opinions that the other commissioners aren't saying, or that they would rather see. So I would rather, I would hope that we could either take a vote on that particular action item, on the language of that action item, or a straw vote of what you want to see in that action item.
All right, I'll open it up to anyone else on the commission would like to weigh in before we go to a motion?
Just on that action item.
Just on this specific action item?
This particular action item.
No? All right, I'd like to make a motion to amend action item SC 2.1.3 to remove the where feasible and add a secure into the network. Do I have a second?
Wait. Before you go, I want to make sure we're clear on. So basically, action 2.13 will read: maintain, expand where feasible the secured network. Is that what you're saying?
A secure.
Oh, is secure. So
A secure network.
is a secure network.
No, just a secure. No is.
Okay. Okay, so it'll be maintain and expand where feasible a secure network of surveillance cameras in the community to discourage and help investigate criminal activity based on the Pinole Police Department advice and experience.
Wait, I believe Commissioner Martinez suggested to strike where feasible. So maintain, expand.
Okay, yes, I'll restate my motion. I would like to make a motion to amend action item SC 2.1.3 so it may read maintain and expand, crossing out where feasible, and then adding a secure network, and completing and maintaining the rest of the policy as it follows. Is that clear for staff?
Yep.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Planning Manager Hannum, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Uch,
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menes,
No.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 5 to 1.
Thank you. And any other policies that we'd like to see changed?
I would like to make a rifle motion because there was certain language raised by Commissioner Martinez that wasn't added into the motion, and I believe the commission also should have the opportunity to vote on my suggested language.
Okay.
So I would like to raise a motion changing the language to read as follows. Maintain, comma, expand, comma, and secure the network of strike where feasible, the network of surveillance cameras in the community to discourage and help investigate criminal activity based on Pinole Police Department advice and experience, period, while ensuring security protocols are administered. I think that was roughly the language that Commissioner Martinez wanted, and he can adjust that if need be.
I would believe that's fine, thank you.
All right, so that's my motion. Do I have a second?
I could second that motion.
Planning Manager Hannum, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Uch,
No.
Commissioner Lamb Julian,
No.
Commissioner Bender,
No.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menes,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
No.
Motion is denied 4 to 2.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannum. Is there another policy that we would like to change in the safety element? Yes.
Clarifying question, page Superfund 66, action SE 2.1.8. Do we have jurisdiction over school staff and public education? I mean, is it just a recommendation to work with the school district? Because I believe that they already have a standing policy for that.
Yes, that's just cooperation with the schools, work with law enforcement to guide and educate the public on active shooter scenarios, and basically work with the schools. We're not dictating to them, but because I know they've got a bunch of protocols in place, but it's just that the two agencies work together.
Okay, because I think last I checked with the parent handbook, that currently the district does not have resource officers on site. They have assigned liaisons from our police department to the different campuses. And then I know that there's a lot of changes at this school district as well. So just wanted to make sure that we were kind of,
Yeah, that was more of working, that the two agencies work together.
okay, thank you. I'm complete.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission?
Sure. So have we already accounted for, so going back to page 64 in the thing, 92 of 165 of the agenda packet, the change for action SE 1.11.4.
Yes, we said that we would delete that action.
Okay, so we weren't changing that to be required in moderate fire hazard severity zones. We're just deleting it entirely.
At this point, that's what it is. So there hasn't been anything, unless the commission wants to keep some portion of that action measure in, then you can settle on some language. That's up to the commission. I mean, I have some recommendations if you would like to hear it, but other than that, that's all.
Yes, I think that I'd be open to keeping some sort of modified version of this. I'd be open to hearing your recommendations.
My recommendation would be basically taking out everything, should be, whereas, or when feasible, require all development to be located outside of the very high hazard severity zone. Oh, wait, should development, okay, the way I had it was just delete the first sentence, actually, and then start, should development be located in a moderate high severity zone, then they must maintain certain defensible space through specific field modification, blush carrying requirements as outlined in the, well, we'll have to delete as outlined in the government code, and required to be built to the current building codes and fire code, building code and fire code. So that's all I had. That was my recommendation on that item.
Is the commission agreeable to that?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, sounds good. It looks like we don't need to make a motion or amend that. I think we're all agreeable to that recommendation.
And then going on to page 69 in the document, page 97 to 165 of the agenda packet. Would it be possible to expand action SE 3.1.5 to discuss partnering with other jurisdictions in the county on the CERT program?
I think we should be opening to partnership. I don't think necessarily kind of taking over, or like for example the Terra Hills example. I think that they would be a great partner. I don't think that we should kind of absorb them. I think that Pinole should probably have its own standalone, but I think that we should also be partnering with the neighboring communities, because we could still be impacted by the same disaster, but I think that Pinole is big enough that it could have its own separate disaster that could not impact Terra Hills in any way. So
What we could do, I do have some language for that, the change of that action measure, would be to explore restoring the CERT program within the city of Pinole and review and coordinate with other outside agencies in conducting annual tabletops, exercises, and community drills. So
That language sounds reasonable to me.
And is the commission agreeable with that? Sounds good. All right, we'll go with that. Any other changes? Yes.
And we've already noted on page 63, following up on action SE 1.9.10, basically seeing what the current state of that is before this makes it to the council.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that got tracked. I think that's all my comments for changes on this item then.
Sounds good. Anyone else on the commission? All right, sounds good. So we'll table this one for now, and then we'll move on to the environmental justice element. So we'll start with questions from the commission, and then we'll start with Commissioner Bender. Or let me know if you need a little bit more time.
I actually don't have any questions. I have some comments, some modifications, but I think we'll wait till that
Perfect.
period.
Perfect. Commissioner Uch.
Yeah, so my comment will be on page 37 or page 136 of 165 in terms of the sections talking about the transit bike and walkability access. Specifically on the second paragraph in terms of talking about walk score. I think in addition of the walk score, we're referencing the quote, the most walkable neighborhoods in Pinole should be listed, then, because I think it'll just add transparency, like, oh, Old Town has a score, if I remember, of like 50 as a good point of reference, than just having walls, baseline's 42. And, just be good to know, like, oh, this part of town is that much walkable with a clear, which is a clear score. And that's all my questions at the moment, or comments, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Uch. Commissioner Martinez.
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Lamb Julian.
No questions at this time, thank you.
Vice Chair Menace.
I have a few questions on this item. So on page 29 in the item, page 128 of 165 in the packet, it states that it's talking about the unemployment indicator represents the percentage of the population over the age of 16 that is unemployed and eligible for the labor force. For that eligibility, is there an age cap on the upper end for eligibility, or is it just 16 to 121? Anywhere in that age range, you fall within the employment tracking.
I could verify that, but I do believe it's 65, the upper age limitation on that item.
Yeah, because that would clarify some questions I have about some of the scores there. Let's
Sounds good.
see.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the characters composite? I'm not sure where you're.
So on page number 29 of the item, or 128 of 165 in the agenda packet, under other census tracts,
Right.
it says Census Tract 3601.02 reports an unusually high unemployment score at 74, while other census tracts report scores either below average or average. The unemployment indicator represents the percentage of the population over the age of 16 that is unemployed and eligible for the labor force. I'm curious about basically the line for eligible for the labor force.
Thank you.
And I guess if Commissioner Lim has a follow-up question on that.
When I pulled up the Census Tract 3601.02, it states it's in Richmond.
That's because most of the census tract is in Richmond.
Okay. It's getting late, thank you.
So
I can pull up the presentation again if you want to see the components that are within the city. Obviously, the majority of them are outside.
yeah. We're just the A to B part.
So, moving on to my next question. On page number 36 in the item, page number 135 of 65 in the agenda packet, figure number 11. So that was made based on April 13th, 2022 data, and that was before Safeway closed. So would it be possible to update this one particular figure with new data, given the impact of Safeway closing on probably several of the regions within this figure?
We can look into it. I don't know the frequency that this data is updated, and if something to that extent would be captured, but we can most certainly review.
Yeah, because if it is feasible, I expect we will probably see a negative impact from the absence of Safeway in the area. And of course, we're going to be talking more about the impact of that later on tonight. Let's see, moving on. So on page number 45 of the item, page 144 of 165 of the agenda packet, Action EJ 1.5.6, just want to clarify, when we're talking about the previous Doctors Hospital building there, we mean the one that's across from the Appian Village development, right?
I would defer to staff at that level of detail.
Because the building site that I would think of by default as the old Doctors Hospital building was, razed to the ground to be replaced with Appian Village. And the one across the street from it, I think, was being redeveloped into condominiums.
Yeah, that's how that one was being used. So in Kerrsville, used in the previous Doctors Hospital building. I think this is referring to the hospital. I think we're going to have to, we need to let's put it this way. We should eliminate Doctors Hospital buildings that we do need to encourage the development of a medical center, emergency room, urgent care, or other hospital use within the community of Pinole. We can take out Doctor's Hospital building.
Okay, because there's going to be some other suggestions I have for fine tuning that action in particular, but that goes more into the realm of comment rather than question. Oh, here's the thing that I think was tripping me up earlier with regards to soil erosion of a safety element. So on the very next page, page 46 of the EJ element 145 and 165 of the agenda packet, action EJ 2.1.3 says prohibit development in areas that are particularly susceptible to erosion and sediment loss. And I think that might be what ties into my question and the safety element about the pretty broad area of the city that's relatively susceptible to, landslides.
Right. Yeah. Well, in most cases, development has occurred in most places in Pinhole. There's not too many open places yet to develop, so. But we would have to take a look at, Noel, maybe you can help me on this one as well, on this action.
Yeah, so the intent behind this action wasn't necessarily linked to landslide. That landslide map in the safety element is specific to deep-seated landslides, so that would be where the underlying bedrock is what is causing like structural instability with the landslide risk. Whereas this equity and environment under policy 2.1 is really trying to minimize water pollution. So again, this policy is not trying to, we can adjust language if the prohibit development is where we're finding issue. The intention is to give the city the ability to integrate mitigation measures if there is a proposed development in an area where there's known erosion risk that's causing a water quality pollution issue.
Because, and if the commission will bear my briefly hopping back to the safety element for a bit here, I want to highlight this figure 17, and note the very large red area in the valley in particular. That's, if I'm reading that chart right, page number 17 of the safety element, page number 45 of the agenda packet. So 100 pages previous in the agenda packet, to be precise. So I think that we need to account for figure 6 in this item, because even if we're just saying, well, landslides are just due to the fundamental geography and they're not as much an erosion risk as such, I know that, for example, the Area 10 ones, like, for example, the scree that's constantly falling into the roadway below the church right across from Oak Ridge Road, that's outright erosion, and it's constant. So I think that since we have figure 6 in the safety element, that that's going to shape that action. And I think it should be referenced at the very least. I guess that's more of a comment, sorry. And moving on from that.
Wait, before we leave that, so what are you saying, that we need to include this figure into this, in the EJ element, or are you saying that we need to, I'm not quite sure what?
I think we need to figure out, if we're not saying that figure 6 is a basis for areas that are particularly susceptible to erosion and sediment loss, that we need to have another figure that's showing what those areas are. Because by default, if you're telling me you can't develop in areas that are particularly susceptible to erosion and sediment loss, and you have this other figure showing the landslide risks areas throughout the city and showing a pretty vast swath of the city falling under that risk area, that would be where I'd look by default.
Okay, but I'm going to throw something out there. But you could have erosion and sediment loss and not necessarily have landslides.
Sure.
So I think that's where this is coming from in terms of, for example, if I'm trying to think of an area. Within a development area. Let's say,
Vista Woods, maybe.
huh?
Vista Woods, maybe.
Or Appian Village, given the dirt that's been blowing off of there.
Yeah, well, no, let's say Vista Woods, that's a good example. It has, the based on the project that came in, the height of the property from one end of the property to the other, they had to put up major retaining walls. They had to do all of that to accommodate for any type of erosion or sediment loss in terms of that project. So where there's not necessarily going to be a landslide there, but it could be, at least in terms of improving, minimize water quality pollution. There could be some erosion there depending on how and where when they did all the grading, but they did all the grading and we mitigated it so that it would be all level at one spot. So we just need to make sure that what I'm thinking this actually saying is if we can't do that, I mean, if we can't mitigate to allow for that to be susceptible to erosion and sediment loss, then we would prohibit development there. I mean, Noelle, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I
No,
just think that's where that policy is going for. It's not going all the way to landslides, where your landslides.
Agree, and that was not the intention. Usually, areas that are susceptible to erosion or sediment loss would be identified in like a site-specific investigation, not necessarily a regional map. Like I mentioned, that landslide map is really mapping deep-seated landslide susceptibility, showing weakness in the bedrock or areas that could be susceptible to, say, seismic ground shaking. And so you could have circumstances where you have surface sloughing, and that's just based on local sediment and might not necessarily be tied to a landslide issue. So like I mentioned, that at the individual property level, that's when that would be best investigated, and mitigation measures can be best recommended as well.
Okay, so my concern here is that we're not saying prohibit if mitigated. We're saying prohibit. We're saying don't do this. So if we want to say prohibit if mitigated, we're going to need to add language saying, that, basically.
I mean, we could add language. I'm going to add something. Noelle, tell me if this wouldn't be consistent, but I'm just going to throw some language out there. Prohibit development in areas that are particularly susceptible to erosion and sediment loss that can't be mitigated through engineering, through standard engineering practices.
Sure.
Yeah, because if we're doing an absolute bar on development, then I think we would need a citywide map, frankly. But if we're just saying prohibit unless mitigated, then that makes more sense.
Sounds good.
But that's going to be more for comments later, I suspect. Let's see. On page number 47, the next page, so page number 146 of 165, it says establish protocol for reducing the use of pesticides in other public spaces maintained by the city. What is other here? Are we talking like other insecticides, herbicides? Are we talking about spaces that are not maintained by the city? What is other applying to here?
I'm going to defer. You're on action 2.
2.2.4, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Establish protocol for reducing use of pesticides and other public spaces maintained by the city. Well, currently we use, we're pretty environmentally safe in terms of what we use for pesticides, and that's all basically through Public Works. We would have to check the public, again, this is more of a general thing. We probably already could have established a protocol for reducing use of pesticides and other public spaces maintained by the city. But this is just an action item to make sure that we do that. But I'm pretty sure our Public Works Department are all already using more herbicides and more different style of non-hazard pesticides for places that are maintained by the city. So that's kind of what that action item is for. It's just we need to establish a protocol that'd be done through the Public Works Department, and we do have, which I don't see as part of this, but we do have implementation of who's implementing it and when. And so Public Works, this would definitely be a Public Works issue.
Yeah, and for clarity, we can eliminate the and other and go with established protocol for reducing the use of pesticides within public spaces maintained by the city.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the intent, I just don't quite understand what and other means. Within makes sense.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's see, any other questions? So moving to the very end, page 52 of the sub-item, page 151 of 165 of the agenda packet. So following on a bit from the prior page, I guess, under policy EJ 4.1, strengthening existing relations with the Ohlone people. It's, action 4.1.1, support the efforts to secure both state and federal recognition, continue to acknowledge them, and then continue to maintain positive and meaningful relationships with the Ohlone people, including early consultation on related land use decisions. Do we have any concrete actions that we can put under this policy? Like, say, for example, dedicate a segment of land or do, something? Have we asked the Ohlone tribes for their input on this particular sub-item?
They will be they will be notified prior to it going to the council. So if and when they'll have 90 days to respond to the element. So normally, again, when we do projects, we do notify. We're required by AB 52 and AB 18. Those are standard laws that we're required by law to notify the tribes regarding different development projects. So that's why it says continue to maintain positive and meaningful relationships, because we do that already as part of state law with projects. So and then they'll make comments, and some of those comments are reflected in your decisions. Like we had and I think it was Vista Woods, I think we had monitoring. We had a monitoring, the tribes recommended monitoring of the site, which they did when they did the grading, and they did, and that's usually when they're monitoring, is usually during the grading process. So that's just those actions are mainly ones that we're already doing, and we just need to maintain and continue doing that.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, in the light of trying to meet the policy goal of strengthening existing relationships with the Ohlone people, can we reach out to them and ask them for suggestions on actions to add under this policy?
Yeah, we could. I mean, they'll get a chance to review it when we send them after this meeting. We will be notifying them of the element and the adoption of the element, because state law requires us to notify them before it goes to the legislative body. We have 90 days before it goes to the legislative body, so they'll be notified prior to that, before we go to council. So if they want to make comments to it and they want to add, they can do that.
Okay. It just, I don't know, it felt like maybe this would be an area where outreach would be helpful, but I guess there's a mandated notification period and they can comment if they want to then.
Yep.
One final question on the very end, action, and I guess it says actions plural, so that should probably be singular. EJ 4.4.3. It says that ensure that future improvements in the impacted community will not produce negative impacts on existing residents, such as increase in pollution exposure, net loss of affordable housing, or displacement of residents. So, is this a hard constraint on the city? Like, for example, would we be barred from, say, doing something like the distribution center, given its potential impact on the impacted community? Would we be required to account for improvements in the impacted community outside of the city of Comal, given that the vast majority of the census tract is not within the city? So, like, what constraints does this action place on the city?
I can jump in there. So these policies only apply within the city of Pinole. They don't apply to actions outside of the city that impact the impacted community, as obviously the city doesn't have jurisdictional control over those decisions. The net loss of affordable housing, I believe that's already a component of your housing element, along with the displacements of residents. So there's already policies in place that prohibit net loss of affordable housing, and if there is a loss and a replacement needs to be constructed, the derivatives of this I don't have immediately available, but if we can point you to the right direction within the housing element if interested. The net increase in pollution exposure would be a component within what the city has control over. So if there's distribution centers proposed outside of the city where you have no control over, that's...
Well, no, I'm talking about a distribution center that was proposed in the city, but that was not within the impacted community itself, just nearby enough that it could reasonably be seen as being downwind or whatever from that site. And it's not net increase in pollution exposure, it's any increase in pollution exposure as I'm reading that language. So either it's so narrow as to be almost meaningless because it's only talking about improvements in the impacted community, so in those 2 or 3 blocks in particular, or it applies to the city as a whole, creating improvements that would impact that community, which I think would typically be the intent of, that policy. And in that case, I think it might have more impacts than we're considering.
That is noted. So the statutory requirement is to include a policy that does not, or include a policy that essentially ensures that additional disproportionate pollution burden will not be placed on your impacted community. There's multiple ways to do that, obviously. Without the specifics about the distribution center that was presented, I can make some broad statements about how we could adjust this language so that findings would ensure that there's no additional negative impacts on existing residents, but I'd also defer to staff on that would be your guys' responsibility to interpret and how we can help advise on that policy accordingly.
Well, in most cases in that area, where our impacted communities are, if you can kind of can you put up that map of where they are again?
Sure, just give me a moment.
No problem. But, depending on where the community center is, like for example, if they're building one in Richmond and we're down, our impacted community is downwind, yes, normally we'll get a notification from Richmond saying that they're building, within our certain city limits. Then we would write them a comment basically, hey, well, we've got an impacted community. You need to help mitigate help mitigate that. They can either go with that, or they can tell us to thank you very much for your comments. We really appreciate your input, and we're going to adopt our conditions the way we do. Now, in terms of our own project, in terms of our warehouse that was built, that was proposed on San Pablo, most of that area is to the west. So most of any type of distribution in terms of like truck and all that isn't near the impacted areas. In terms of wind flow, in terms of how the wind blows off of the bay. There was an air quality analysis done on that project, and there is mitigation as part of that, as part of the conditions of approval when that building is being built. So in most cases, if we are approving projects in and around that local impacted community, we will be providing mitigation and impact, because everyone's going to have to do an environmental review as part of their project. So, and even with our notice of exemptions, I don't know, I mean, we've taken a stronger approach with our notice of exemptions in terms of policies, in that we'd still do studies to show that these projects do not create a significant impact. So, so if they do, then of course we have to raise the environmental. We'll add conditions of approval, mitigation measures that would have to be adhered to by those individual developments for that impacted community. So, but yeah, anything outside the community we can always suggest and recommend and suggest. But the other agencies can tell us, thank you very much. We really appreciate your comments, and we'll see you on the next round. So we try to work with them on some projects, but just that happens that way. So,
Right.
but yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with that.
I'm not suggesting that we try and control, say, what Richmond does. That's obviously infeasible, given jurisdictional issues. But
In fact, I don't. Noel, do you have more of a street view of the? I think maybe this more of a street view of where that. Okay, Marlesta. I'm assuming that where's San Pablo at? Okay, that's San Pablo probably.
I don't have a street view of
Okay.
of the impacted communities, but could procure that at a later date if
Yeah,
needed.
that's okay. Okay, so because where I'm looking at where those impacted communities are and where they are in the community, they're mostly out to the west and to the north. And so when the winds are coming in, they're coming in through that way. So that any really, and we don't really have an industrial base. The city doesn't, except for maybe the cement plant. But other than that, that's really the most. And even with the warehouse that's being proposed, they have about 17 stalls, 18 stalls. So it's relatively, from a warehousing perspective, it's fairly small. So the air quality impacts were fairly limited, but in terms of this action, I mean, this was something that we would review as part of the development of a project when it came in, and we would mitigate accordingly so that those areas are not impacted. I mean, that's kind of that's really the only way I can. In terms of affordable housing, we don't displace affordable housing. At least none of the all the areas that we would be able to put a warehouse, we're not allowed to put housing on that property anyway. So,
Right.
or probably the property next door. So, so I don't think we would be displacing affordable housing or residents based on the development that we have left in that area of the city. That's really on the border of the city limits.
So I have a suggestion for this might be in one of the slides, but I know it's definitely of a document itself. Back on page 14 of the environmental justice thing, so page 113 of 165 for the agenda packet as a whole, figure number 3 shows sort of a street overlay underneath the pink and turquoise segments.
Yeah.
And I think that block group 2000 looks like it's right along San Pablo, right to the west of Gately, I believe. So right at the border between 601-335-9102 and 601-339-2200.
Right, and that's approximately about, if I'm not mistaken, that's probably about a half mile. That area is probably more towards the Del Monte Shopping Center, right around in that area, and comparable to where the Pinole Shores project is. That's probably about a mile. It's about a mile to the west, mile and a half to the west, at least for that project. Of course, the cement plant is a little closer because it's right next door. But those, like I said, those were really the only two, in terms of industrial projects, that we really have in the city at this point. So at this point, and we do have air quality mitigation required with the Pinole Shores 2 project. So I think, again, when we refer back to that policy, I think the city does that just based on our environmental. In most of that area where it's at is residential. I mean, in terms of, and it's right on the board. I mean, it's even north or west of the Del Monte Center is where I'm thinking that it's kind of up and around that area. So I think that we just need to make sure that if there are any development in that area, to make sure that we mitigate impacts so that they do not create increases in pollution exposure to the extent where we're losing affordable housing and the displacement of residents.
So I guess my question there is, again, like in the earlier item, I'm not reading a if mitigated segment here. It's will not produce negative impacts, period, full stop.
Right.
So if we want to say unless mitigated, then we would need to add that language. That would weaken this item.
I'm okay to add that. I mean, I don't think there's, unless there's something from a regulatory standpoint.
Oh, that would prohibit us? No, I think
Yeah.
that's a fine edit.
Okay. Negative impact unless mitigated.
And then I guess I have more of a comment about the potential scope of that action, but that's going outside of questions and into comments. So I think that's all my questions for this item.
Any other questions from the commission at this time? Yes, Commissioner Lamb Julian.
Okay, I'll just make this super brief. Under page 43 in the packet, page 142 of 165, policy EJ 1.2, just a clarifying question about equitable access. My understanding is that the senior center is owned by the city, however, it is run through a third party. And I know that I have had several community members reach out to me asking if it's possible for, even at a different rate, for non-seniors to participate in some of the senior classes. I did connect with Director Dwyer, and she said they are unable to because it is managed by a third party. So just seeing if we can somehow incorporate that to make sure that we're actually making it equitable for folks to be able to participate in a recreational facility here in town, that they are just not over 65.
That is a good question. I would have to defer to staff. Obviously, I know that there's probably contract limitations that are in place that might limit the age for participation in senior center activities specifically. There are broader policies here that talk about promoting equitable access to recreational opportunities, and we can maybe expand upon that to include comparable or similar activities for all ages. But I would have to expect that certain senior center funding might be the limiting factor for that component as regards to like age restrictions for participation. I'm not entirely familiar with the nuance of that item, to be completely honest.
Well, in most cases, I mean, when we're talking about recreational opportunities, I mean, it's either those are put on by the third party, but the city does have different youth programs and different programs. So I'm assuming that if there's a program that, let's say, I'll just take Zumba for example, because that's my favorite one. If there are people that wanted to create, if the city create a Zumba class for residents or ages between ages of 18 to 60, whatever the senior limit is, 65, I'm sure we would be able to accommodate that within our facility, right? So, but that program would then have to be established by the city, that if the city were to run it, similar to like the youth activities. So, and then have different classes and different pay and set up all the schedules and all that kind of stuff. So it's not that we don't, but we would definitely have to look at what recreation could do as part of, you know, their staffing and all that kind of stuff for those types of programs.
Okay, because I do believe Director Dwyer was saying that staffing was an issue, and that's why they had to resort to a third party. In just wanting to highlight and amplify that we do have programs for tiny tots for the littles, and there is you know, my little guy loves the youth program and the camps. It's just several young, older-ish non-seniors are looking for some place to go, and they not necessarily wanting to have to go to Richmond or Berkeley or just really commute far, of just being able to provide something, an option closer to home that they would be able to do if, you know, their little one was at Tiny Tots. What can they do? Because everybody loves bingo.
Yeah, no, that's no, that's and it's usually like in a lot of other cities, what they'll do is, depending if the program pays for itself, then that's you know, meaning that, you know, let's say they have 100, they have 100 people, their fee is enough to be able to handle a staff member, then they'll do that. I mean, that's usually kind of how Recreation Services is kind of done. But I would refer to Director Dwyer on how they run their programs and how they staff their programs and that. So, but that would be definitely something we would have to probably run through the city.
Okay.
Into one of our facilities.
Thank you.
Or if we did have like joint use agreement with the gym, we could be able to create a youth basketball program. Or if we had joint use facilities with, you know, different other agencies to help us, the facilities that we don't have. So that's kind of why this area is collaborating with school districts, and encouraging with educational facilities. In some cities, the recreation departments are able to use classrooms, actually use school classrooms, or a cafeteria for after school programs, or, you know, that kind of stuff. So so that's kind of how the city would run those types of things, by having to use other people's facilities, in which case, you know, we need joint use agreements and staffing and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's something that they would ensure that we're trying to do. So that's kind of how that would kind of work in terms of recreation.
Yes, Vice Chair Manis.
So I guess following up on Commissioner Lamb-Julian's question, would it be possible to modify Action EJ 1.2.1 to expand it to be not just with school districts, but with other entities more broadly?
If staff is interested in pursuing such an action.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that normally school districts are the ones that we want to do joint use, because they have all the facilities, right? They have the pools, they have the tracks, they have the classroom facilities, they got the auditoriums, they've got, you know, they have those all facilities all in one place. So that's usually why that's why it says collaborate with school districts to form joint use, so that we can use all their good stuff, right? All their fun stuff. And then so I don't know if we want to. There aren't very many people that have different facilities that would allow them to pools and do sports and do that kind of stuff. So usually the schools, or else they would just be in our parks, right? So we do, you know, like the soccer park down by Pinole Valley, or, you know, Fernandez for Little League, you know, that kind of stuff. So So that's why it's specifically to the school district, because we're trying to piggyback and use their stuff. So I don't know if we really want to, tackle to be honest with you, tackle these to go after kind of, because there's really not another entity that would provide that, unless, they wanted to take Pilates and they wanted to discount, you know what I mean? We have Pilates studios around town, or, if they, all depending on what they want to do. I mean, it's, and is this for the 18 to 64, or is this for the 13 to 18, or the, so I mean, there's just a lot of, it's a broad range. And so, so that's why I think if we start really narrowing this down, I think the way it's worded allows us to work with those entities to allow for those facilities to be used by the public. And that's kind of what we need to do. We need to work with the district to be able to do that.
I guess if I'm understanding the concern that members of the community brought up to Commissioner Lamb-Julian, based on my own personal experience, and I'm sure based on the personal experiences of many of the members of the commission in a similar age group, part of the issue is just the lack of organized recreational opportunities, et cetera, for people in that 18 to 64 age range. So I think it might be worthwhile maybe to have an explicit action item calling that out, saying, we want to have recreational opportunities available for all ages, including, the 18 to 64 range. Would that be possible?
Commissioner Martinez.
Folks, at the end of the day, we got to remember all of these programs traditionally are coming from some funding source. And with our city budget being what it is, where we're honestly running a deficit every year, I don't think it's a good idea for us to put forth requirements out there. The reason that we see things for the 65 plus is because those funding sources come from the state, a regional funder, a federal or a national funding grant system. And I'm pretty confident if the city had other means to offer these other services, we'd be offering them through grants, or, how we're going to fund these departments, because at the end of the day, it requires staff require benefits, all that sort of stuff. So when we start trying to put additional restrictions out there, it gets to be a pretty slippery slope, because it becomes a funding issue, right? So I think the way it's worded, I would be very comfortable just leaving it as is, because the departments that are making these things, I'm confident if they had additional funding resources, they would roll those programs out almost immediately. But it becomes a staffing issue and all these other things that are behind the scenes, what it requires to be supported. Thank you.
I guess I'm not seeing this as requiring the city to undertake any action, and certainly not as requiring a particular pricing structure. I'm full well aware of the significant annual deficits that the Recreation Department runs by comparison to the other funds in the city, due in at least part to the subsidies the city provides for the purpose of equity. But one potential advantage of targeting the 18 to 64 age group is that you could potentially do that in an equitable way without needing as much, or potentially even any, of a subsidy, in the way that's simply not feasible for, say, targeting people on fixed incomes like seniors, or tiny tots, maybe from disadvantaged populations, or so on and so forth. Like, just because we're suggesting the city should look into having programs of this kind doesn't mean we're saying the city needs to subsidize those programs. It's just saying, or that those programs even necessarily will end up working out at all. Just saying, as part of our aspirational goals, as part of our environmental justice goals, that under this policy, where we're trying to get adequate and equitable access to recreational opportunities, that part of what we think adequate and equitable means includes access to all age groups.
Well, I think, if I might, let's just read the policy. It says ensures adequate and equitable access to recreational opportunities, including access to parks, open space, natural spaces, trails to promote healthy lifestyles and prevent obesity. Okay, we're not talking age groups. That's just a general in terms of creating more areas, creating access to these type of opportunities. And with number 121, collaborate with school districts to form joint use of facility agreements for uses of pools, sports, recreational facilities. And that's, and really the joint use agreements, I know in other cities that I've worked with, it allows the school to open the track, on Saturdays from 9 to 2 for the community to go out and use, or the tennis courts, or the swimming pool, or most people from 18 to 24, they're either going to go to a gym, for those that don't go to the gym, or, and they're looking for some other physical activity, it's something of this nature. And it's the facility, not necessarily what you're looking for, not necessarily the age group. Is there a facility to be able to do this recreational activity? And in our case, because we don't really have any, we have the park, you can walk around the park, we've got the pool, we've got the library, we've got some of our own city parks. We don't have a gym, we don't have some other, to do other sports. We might need the collaboration of the school district to use their facility to be able to facilitate that, whatever that exercise, whatever that is. So I think if we go back to reading what the policy is saying, is it's just basically saying to ensure that we've got adequate facilities and access to opportunities, and access to parks and open space, and by collaborating with the schools and encouraging it just gives us a broader range of access that we can get for our community, whether they're 18 to 64, whether they're from 4 to 13, or whether they're 65 and over. So, I don't think it's limited. It's not these policies aren't limiting age groups. It's access to actual facilities, and that's kind of where. And if by collaborating with the school district, it allows us to access additional facilities for more people to access for the recreation, to promote the healthy lifestyle and prevent obesity. I think that's where that's policy, and those action measures are headed.
And if I may jump in just to give some context about why the element provides so much focus on those over the age of 65 and children, those are specific categories that the Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 tracker specifically identifies as socially vulnerable. So the intention was not necessarily to ignore the middle age group, the 18 to 65, and recreational opportunities provided to them. It's just responding to the social vulnerability definitions that are set forth by the state as related to those age groups. And because that's widely acknowledged by the state, there's funding resources for recreational programs with those age groups, and that's where most recreation programs through the city are funded through. Our team wasn't scoped to do an in-depth analysis, like studying the gaps in current recreation services offerings. We really just focused on what the city is currently offering and wanted to enhance the ability of the city to make those offerings as equitable as feasible within the frameworks that are provided. But hopefully that gives additional context to why those age groups were specifically called out, not to necessarily exclude the others, but because of those definitions and social vulnerability.
Okay, I guess this is sort of the final thing I'll say on this item for right now, because it is getting late, but I do think that as a matter of equity, we should at least address all groups, not just the ones highlighted by Cal EnviroScreen, because I can guarantee you're going to hear about it if not. And that's getting more into comments, so I'll stop there.
With that, are there any other questions on the environmental justice element. All right. I also do not have any further questions, so with that, we'll move to a public comment. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No speakers online right now.
All right, and then we will move back to comments. With that, let's go with Commissioner Martinez. Any comments on this?
None.
Commissioner Lam Julian.
Just a clarification, so understanding now that BMI was not tasked with delving into the scope if the city is in fact optimizing all of its own facilities that we do own, rather, granted, if we rent out or have a managerial company that oversees it, I think it's a gap that we should look into at maybe at some other point, if not now, since it's not under their scope and they can't really add further context because they were not tasked with that piece. Understanding that we should look into facilities that have other recreational facilities. Are we optimizing our resources that we have right now? Understanding that we have a management company that manages senior center, is that the best option moving forward? If we're looking to prevent obesity, folks looking at gym memberships, right? That's kind of crazy right now. And just if we're looking at promoting a healthy lifestyle, the community members I'm speaking to have a limited time, limited resources, and it just seems that we did not explore all of the options and address this gap in this community, understanding that the Enviro set was looking at for children and seniors, but just for young adults and younger-ish seniors, that we didn't take that into account is my comment, and I am complete.
Vice Chair Menace.
So I do still have some comments. On page number 15 of the packet, of the item, page 114 of 165 of the packet, it says, because Cal EPA has established Cal Enviro Screen 4.0 data, I think that should be past tense, established, Edie. And that's a typographical comment more of anything else, but it wasn't really a question, so I didn't bring it up earlier. Let's see, address that. On page number 45 of the element, page 144 of 165 of the agenda packet, action EJ 1.5.1. It talks about healthcare services and facilities, but it doesn't talk about staffing. And I know from personal experience that you can have a facility, but if the agencies in charge of that facility reallocate staffing so that there's nobody there, there's not going to be, say, urgent care in Pinole, for one specific example. So I'd like to see language added to EJ 1.5.1 and provide adequate staffing.
Would that be at the end of to such facilities? Or where would that be located in the?
So it would be encourage local healthcare providers to locate healthcare services and facilities and provide adequate staffing to ensure equitable accessibility to such facilities, I think would work best in terms of wording. Do I need to make a motion on that, or is that generally acceptable to the commission?
Yes.
Okay. Then going back again on the next page, 46, page 145 of 165, action EJ 2.1.3, we noted down unless mitigated on the susceptible to erosion or sediment loss. Just wanted to make sure that the unless mitigated got added in there, because if not, then we would need to have a map. And on the final page, 52, page 151 of 165, again noting that we wanted to add the unless mitigated language, possibly. I don't know whether we came to a consensus on that one yet, but I wanted to flag that. And that's all of my comments for the moment.
Which was the last one that you had mentioned?
So the one that says actions, EJ, and it should be actions, singular, actions, EJ 4.4.3, it's ensure that future improvements in the impacted community will not produce negative impacts on existing residents. So I think that whole action could maybe get workshopped a little, like ideally what it would say is ensure that future improvements in the city do not produce negative impacts in the impacted community unless mitigated. Because I think that's what sort of the policy EJ 4.4 is trying to address, improvements in programs that address the needs of the impacted communities. And since we're doing this as a general plan item that's looking forward, as CEQA typically looks forward for as long as CEQA continues to exist, that action EJ 4.4.3 right now is both too narrow in that it's only focusing on the impacted community in particular, and too broad in that it's blocking anything regardless of mitigation. So I'd like to both make it broader and narrower by saying that future improvements in the entire city, not just the impacted community, that have impacts on the impacted community, because that's sort of the goal of what we're going towards with the policy and with, the whole environmental justice element working towards addressing impacted communities in particular, saying that future improvements in the city that have an impact on the impacted community will not produce negative impacts unless mitigated, and then leave the rest of the language the same.
For clarity, could you repeat that? As I would read.
Sure. So, action, singular, EJ 4.4.3. Ensure that future improvements in the city that would have an impact on the impacted community will not produce negative impacts unless mitigated on existing residents, such as increase in pollution exposure, net loss of affordable housing, or displacement of residents. And I'm not sure if that's quite the right wording for produce negative impacts. Unless mitigated, it's like, there's a standard CEQA phrasing. It's like post-mitigation negative impacts or something along those lines. Staff, can you help me out here?
It's less than significant unless it's less than significant, or mitigated less than significant to a less than significant level.
Okay, so ensure that future improvements of the city that have an impact on the impacted community are mitigated to a less than significant level. And I guess, is that acceptable to the commission? Because that's going to significantly broaden the scope of this action.
Vice Chair Menace, before, I just want to make sure, Justin and I will word that language similar to what it says in the CEQA language, so that it maximizes what you're talking about.
Right. I just want to be clear that this is applying to the entire city,
Right.
Not just the impacted community. Anything in the entire city that would create an impact on the impacted communities would be required to be mitigated to a less than significant level under this action.
Is the commission agreeable to that?
All right. then that's all of my comments for the moment.
Commissioner Bender.
I might just have a few sort of cleanup comments. On page 6, it's 105 of the packet, the last paragraph, the second sentence of that last paragraph, where it says, with a reach from present-day San Francisco through Monterey Bay. I think San needs to be stricken. The next one is, and it pertains again to the old Doctor's Hospital, on page 38, which is 137 of the packet. At the very top sentence of that page, it says physical structure remains vacant. That's referring to Doctor's Hospital. The remains vacant should just say, obviously, was demolished. And the final one is actually on page 31. It's 130 of the packet. It's under other census tracts, it's the second paragraph on that page. And I'm going to the second sentence, which says, generally, white populations represent the followed by Hispanic, Asian American, Afro American, and then other. Maybe this is more a question, but it says white populations represent what is my question?
I think the intent there is to have it say largest population group based on the following sentences.
I'm assuming that, but it'd be kind of nice if that were actually just clarified.
Yeah, we can clarify that.
And that is the extent of my comment.
Commissioner Uch.
None.
And one that I think that we had missed from earlier, I believe this was the one regarding the Doctor's Hospital. So this would be on page 45 of the element, 144 of the agenda packet, just on action EJ 1.5.6, crossing out the previous Doctor's Hospital building and just replacing that with the community. I think we had discussed that one earlier, so just wanted to bring that one up again. And then any other comments from the commission at this time? Sounds good. All right. And with that, I would like to make a motion adopting the resolution to recommend the safety and environmental justice elements updates to the general plan as amended by the commission.
And I guess, sorry, just a brief question before a second on this item. The update to figure 11's already been accounted for, right? Page 36, page 135 of 165.
What was the page of the element?
So figure 11, page 36 of the element, page 135 of 165 of the agenda packet. I know I brought that up during questions. I'm not sure whether it needs to be flagged again at this point or whether it's been noted already by staff.
Yes, we can flag that one again if it's feasible.
I noted it as well. Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. And I'll second the motion. As
Planning Manager Hannon, could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Uch,
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menace,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Sounds good. And with that, thank you for all of your help and staff and bearing with us with all those questions. All right. As this is a public hearing item, just to disclose, where is the disclosure? If the decision gets challenged, if someone from the public wants to challenge the decision of the commission regarding our action taken tonight, you may limit it only to be raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing or in writing delivered to the city of Pinole at or prior to the public hearing. And with that, we'll move to our old business, which would be a continuation of the discussed redevelopment of Appian 80 Shopping Center with our compiled ideas and resolution. Resolution. This is our second revision. I think for the interest of time, I think we'll go through go through questions from the commission quickly, and then we'll go through it, I think, one by one more time.
Yeah, I would Mr. Chair, I would,
Or
I'd recommend we go through each section just one by one and make sure we got all the numbering right, make sure, well, the numbers, I think we changed the numbers to the regular numbers now, right? So so unless you have differences from the red line versions that we had before, so comments, because the clean copy of Exhibit A, that is the one with all your changes that were made as part of the last meeting, and of course Exhibit B is the red line copy, so that make sure we've got all your comments. So if you just want to go through each of the sections of mixed use and design development, go from there. That'd be great.
yes, I think we'll go through that. We'll just go through it one by one. If anybody on the commission has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. All right, so as it reads, Exhibit A, Development Ideas and Concepts at P&80 Shopping Center, City of Pinole. Under mixed-use development, does anyone have any issues with item 1? Item 2? Item 3? Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
This is more of a comment than a question, but the spacing between the bullet point 3 and the sentence, it's missing a space, I think. You can see it when you compare it to 1 and 2 or the other items.
Okay, I can make a note of that. Item 4. Item 5. Item 6. 7. 8. Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
8, is there some way we can restructure it to not have basically consideration sit on its own line like that? It looks sort of like it's a sub-item.
I think the word consideration might not fit. So
Like, can we hyphenate consideration somehow, break it up so that it flows through there?
We can expand the margin to be able to set the whole word on the line before.
Yeah,
Let's
'cause
expand the margin.
just the way that the spacing, it looks like
Yeah.
consideration is its own item. I'm not the only one that sees that, right?
Yeah, no, I get it.
right, and then item 9. Item 10. Item 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 13, yes.
So the wording here feels a bit off. We're saying development should consider the need for an affordable grocery option vacated by the Safeway. That doesn't quite, like, maybe caused by the Safeway's absence, like need for an affordable grocery option vacated by the Safeway doesn't quite make sense as a sentence to me.
Yeah.
Or, just take out, just keep it as development should consider the need for an affordable grocery option. And just remove vacated by Safeway. Just to clean up that sentence.
That's fine.
I'm agreeable to that. Anything else on 13?
No, that was the main issue I had with 13.
All right, and then 14? 15? 16? 17? 18? 19? 20? And 21?
So I note that Commissioner Martinez isn't with us at the moment, but I know that he raised several points with regards to prepared foods in particular that's the thing, it's not showing up here. And it would probably fall under 15, add significant sales tax revenue. But I think it was more specific than just talking about type of tenant mixes in restaurants. It was an explicit desire for prepared food in particular.
And that was related to his comments with regards to Whole Foods, because that's
Yeah.
what, part of their business model.
So maybe under footnote, except,
Well, footnote 5, it says examples may include Yard House and Whole Foods.
right, but it doesn't say why. I'm wondering, maybe we could expand the footnote a bit to talk a bit about prepared foods being a sales tax benefit? Because that seems like the sort of thing that would ordinarily go in a footnote.
Yeah, we can add something to that.
Just want to make sure that we're not missing that, because I know that was a priority of Commissioner Martinez, and he's not here to advocate for it right now.
Is that agreeable for everyone? Okay. And then 21, I believe, was the last one. We're all good? Any other questions or clarification?
For 21, was our intent to just limit it to commercial land vacancy fee? And how are we defining commercial land? Is it land zoned for commercial use?
I believe it should be commercial land that is currently vacant.
Or wasn't it, weren't we calling it like economic surplus? Or instead of a fee?
Commission for the commercial land vacancy fee. If I'm not mistaken, I thought that, and we probably need to go back to the minutes, that regarding the vacancy fee, that it was really parcel specific more than just commercial land.
Yeah, I think the intent was kind of more for commercial land specifically, so both like smaller businesses, but also the larger vacancies as well. Specifically for commercial ones, and
Citywide.
having some sort of way where the fee is waived if like an application comes in, so then it kind of would go into like a grace period. Oh, there's a application waiting at this time, the fee is not it's not going to incur any fee.
Well, we would have to go through a whole process to develop the fee
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
we can just, on this topic, we can just say that in terms of Planning Commission furthers just the City Council, I would say we'd give consideration to a nexus study in developing a citywide commercial land vacancy fee. Because that's basically what we're going to have to do anyway. We just can't, $35 or, So if we had some language just saying that, that you'd consider a nexus study to do a commercial land vacancy fee or do something like that, if that's acceptable to the commission.
I definitely think adding the language to a nexus study will make it more likely that something will actually happen, so I'm good with that.
Works for me. Yeah, so that changes, the commission's agreeable with that change. Any other questions for or clarification needed on this item? Nope. All right, so let's go to public comment. Do we have any public comment on this item?
I do see one hand raised online. It's caller with the phone number ending in 5748. Caller, when you're ready, please press *6 to unmute.
Please note that you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You're discussing the Safeway Tower Hills project,
Yes, that is correct.
correct? Yes. I was just curious, I haven't been able to track everything from start to end, but would this be the appropriate time or not to include landscaping requirements by the city or suggestions, which would also lend to the question people been having. There's a lot of blight and stuff going on along the outer back perimeter of that property. And if and when it's developed, there's a giant ravine back there, and it seems to collect debris from the I-80 on-ramps, freeway, and other things from that existing property, not to mention the grove of tall, old, dead pine trees that are an existing fire hazard there. So where and who draws the property lines in terms of the county, Caltrans, and or that property being part of the new landlord or the city's responsibility to maintain along with the property's future landscaping. And also with regard to the tenants that will be the old tenants, in addition to the new tenants, have you discussed color coordinate schemes for the buildings, and to make sure that the older tenants that are existing there, like that little restaurant, the dry cleaners, the Chinese restaurant, etc., are all on board, and that they also would be required to coordinate with the similar type paint exterior colors within the shopping center. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Plan Manager Hannah, would there be any clarification that could be given on this regarding the
Yeah, once
constituents
the
in terms of
new
the-
property owner decides what they want to do with the project, then they're going to have to come in for a design review as part of their process for the city, especially for that project area. Currently, in terms of the stuff that's being dumped down the ravine, I'm kind of looking right now to kind of see who owns what. And the Safeway project area, in terms of the ravine's pretty much owned by Caltrans. That's Caltrans property right away. They only own probably about, it looks like, I would say 50 feet off of the paved area in the rear of the property. And at least, well, it's kind of like an average because it's on the diagonal. So in some areas, it's probably only maybe 5 or 10 feet, but in feet. Oh. Feet. So in the biggest area, it would be from the pavement, be about 80 feet in the biggest area. So be from 80 down to like 10 feet. So they've got some. It would be their responsibility to do that. We could send code enforcement out to kind of take a look at what's happening behind the building. We do have it fenced off in one area because we were having issues with trucks and that. We do have it fenced off. We could look at fencing off the backside as well so that people can't get back there. So I think currently they can. So we'll work with the property owners to take care of that. But that we'll address that during the code enforcement issue on that.
Thank you. And do we have any other public comments?
No other public comments at this time.
Sounds good. And with that, we'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Bender, any closing comments?
My only closing comment is that hopefully it becomes something other than a strip mall. And I think we need to remind ourselves that there is no project at this time.
Commissioner Utch,
None.
Commissioner Lamb Julian.
Just echoing Commissioner Bender's sentiments that there is no project slated for that property, and just hoping that something comes through because our community deserves it. Thanks.
Vice Chair Menace.
I think possibly there's room for consideration of aesthetic properties, because that's not really addressed aside from under point 10 talking about parking garages. We're not really talking about color coordination else. Could we maybe add a point under design and development saying that development should strive to have a unified color scheme?
Is the commission agreeable to that?
I would say no. We're not to that stage yet. We're just dealing with conceptual, what we would like to see planning-wise. That's different than getting into what the buildings look like, blah, 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 blah. And again, we're hoping the current property owner will even pay attention to this document. There's no guarantee. And who knows? Maybe someone else will buy it, and then it'll be a different story. Who knows? It's all up in the air. I think right now, I think the document, I think, expresses sort of the aspiration and the hopes of what this will be from a macro picture, and I think we should just leave it at that.
Okay.
And we spent a fair amount of time in dealing with this, frankly. But I think it's been worth it, because I think the document is actually, it's evolved and it's improved, and it's become more succinct. And again, I do have to say, I understand, city council members have to read those, 400, 500, 600 pages every 2 weeks. We want to keep this short and sweet and simple and aspirational.
All right, then I guess setting aside the question of aesthetics for right now, broadly speaking, just wanted to make sure that we had the change to footnote 5 noted down as something we're all agreed on. I think that was the main change that was made, aside from the one typographical change on footnote on item 3.
Yes. Yes, I believe everyone was in agreement with that one. All right. Any other comments? No? With that, I think I'd like to thank the staff and the commission for all of the work that went into this. It's kind of a little bit hard to believe that it went actually for 3 separate meetings. But I hope that the developer is listening, and I hope that if the developer chooses to come up with something new for this site, that it's beautiful and is a site that Pinole deserves. And if this developer chooses not to or to sell, I hope that whoever plans to develop the site goes back and looks to see what aspirations we had. And with that, I would like to make a motion to pass Planning Commission Resolution 2508 with Exhibit A, Development Ideas and Concepts, as amended by the Commission.
I'll second.
Planning Manager Hannum, could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Utch.
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb Julian.
Yes.
Commissioner Bender.
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez. Make a note that Commissioner Martinez has left the building and would not vote on this item. Vice Chair Minnis,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for everyone's hard work on this item. And we will still continue on to our new business, which we have none. And we'll move on to our city planners report. Planner Manager Hannum, do you have anything to report?
I have 72 items to discuss tonight. No, just
One at a time, please.
yes. No, just have a few things. Quick. I will be next week. I will be, or into this week, beginning of next week. I will be in Monterey for the APA conference. So I'll be learning some new and fun things of what's happening in the world of planning in California. So that'll be a fun event. In terms of projects, we're still waiting for Fire to comment on the Pinole Shores 2 project. So hopefully we can get that wrapped up, and then we can get to the next level to that project. As you can see, Appian Village is moving forward fairly quickly on their first 3 buildings. I think they're getting their framing up and they're moving. So we're working with them to get their lighting landscaping district stuff done, and so we're working with them to do that. And then we're also working with them on making sure they have all their conditions prior to occupancy or first occupancy. So we're working with them to get that done. The Pinole Vista project, we are working with the owner right now. We haven't heard one way really or the other where they're going. They do have that project entitlement until October of next year, so they do have a little bit of time to. And they do have a time for a 1 year. I think they do have the ability to do a 1 year extension, and that'd be the last one if they decide to do that. So, but that's not till next October. So working on that. A couple lot line adjustments, easy ones that are happening. Very simple. Really, those are really the only development projects that are left. Working hopefully next month. You will get we're going to schedule a workshop, public workshop for parklets and open dining. It will be here in the chambers. I'm working with our communications staff. We'll be inviting all the downtown businesses and everybody else who wants to attend here in the chambers, and to talk about outdoor parklets and outdoor dining. And then hopefully once that's been completed, get those back to the commission and to the council within the next month or so. We want to try and wrap those up by the end of the year. Get it to the commission by the end of the year, and hopefully get it to the council first thing in January. Start out the new year with those policies. And then our objective development design standards. I'm probably going to need to go through. I'm making changes now based on what the ad hoc committee is making or recommended. I hopefully will have all of that knocked out by the end of. I'm trying to run it at the same time as the parklet, so working to get that to the commission here in the next probably 60 days to commission for you guys to review. Other than that, that's all I have. Unless you have particular questions on anything I can answer, that's all I have tonight. So, Justin, do you have anything? Or
let's see. So this department had a few interns over the summer. One of the projects that we've been collaborating on is to put together an ADU webpage on the planning division webpage. So that's a source to kind of collect all the information for ADUs in case anyone's interested in the various ADU programs that the city offers to get ADUs permitted. The department is also hosting the third in the set of workshops for the Pinole Accessible Living Program. So it's held at the Senior Center. The Pinole Accessible Living Program. It's a series of workshops that the building department has been doing to help seniors and folks understand how to get building permits in order to upgrade their homes for accessibility, as they're aging in place. And that third workshop is step-by-step making your home more accessible.
Thank you, both staff. And any questions from the commission? Commissioner Lamb-Gillian.
Okay, if Planning Manager Hennem, you can give the folks at the Appian Village a gentle reminder to be good neighbors. Several community members have reached out that the trucks are driving kind of reckless, and I witnessed a cement truck driving the wrong way during drop-off to get into the lot, and they were very upset and honking. And just since that area is already congested with the middle school and the Mandarin school, it's just, it's already congested and people are already trying to get through that intersection, and they're already trying to go around, like on Kildare, to be able to hop over by the gas station. It's getting a little hostile between the community members and the workers there, so just a gentle reminder to be a good neighbor. Thank you.
We will give them a gentle reminder.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamb-Gillian. Vice Chair Menace.
So to follow up on that, when I was listening to the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Commission meeting this past Wednesday, I heard a comment from a public commenter along similar lines saying, that there was a whole bunch of issues going on around drop-off time, in particular with lanes being closed off, and they were asking whether there had been any conditions of approval set on the project to basically constrain, the hours of operation so it wouldn't be overlapping with the drop-off pickup time period. And I know that staff gave a partial answer during that meeting, but I figure you folks might know better about conditions of approval in particular. So I wanted to raise that.
That's what we do, conditions of approval. Yeah, we've been working with them basically to stay out of the drop-off. Public Works has as well. They've got some hours that they sent over to. I know there was a thread of emails today regarding between a Public Works director or Public Works specialist and the principal at the middle school. So about drop-offs and when they can access the road and do road work and do those types of things, because they've got to do something. They have to be able to do something. We will, and I think we have to remind them that mindful of drop-off and pickup again, and just makes them aware of it. And I think once the striping gets down, I think that's another issue right now is they just slurry sealed the road. They don't have the striping. They've got the little stickers, and those are flying up all over the place. In fact, I was just on it yesterday. I was like, oh man, I can see what this looks like at 8 o'clock in the morning or 3:30 in the afternoon. So we'll be working with them to make sure that they maintain those stickers and or at least maintain the lanes until they paint. I think that'll be the big. Hopefully that will solve some of the problems, because most of the road work is done. I want to say they might have a couple more things, probably more of the striping. I think that's really the last thing they need to do in the road, because they've done the slurry. I'll have to check with them to make sure. They might have to do some work, but in terms of doing the sidewalk, and that's going to be another issue on their side, because they're going to be putting in all new curb gutter sidewalk. So when they start tearing that up, there could be some lane closures because they need space to work within that area. So that's something that we'll have to work with Public Works on to make sure that they are maintaining their, with the drop off and the drive through. So or pickup. Actually, the drive-through. Actually, the two drive-throughs. So yeah, I'll relay that to KJ tomorrow and let him know that, hey, you guys got to be out there monitoring them a little more, or the inspectors need to be out there monitoring them a little more, because they're gonna run over us. So we'll try and get that done. But just to let you know, we have seen some email threads going through regarding that issue. So. Well, there's nothing posted. They should be like when they're closing the road, which they shouldn't be closing the road unless they have approval from us. They've only had approval from us for one weekend when we did it over the weekend when they did the slurry. That was the only time they've really been able to close the road. Huh? Was that this last That was, yeah, the 13th and the 14th. So I don't know if that was this weekend. Well,
Commissioner
yeah, so
Lamb-Julian,
that's
your
something that
microphone.
we're going to have to talk to them about, that they're going to have to request. And it's usually on the, we've told them that, you know, if you have major stuff that you need to do, you need to save it for the weekend. But they need to request, as part of the conditions of approval, they have to request use to be able to do it. It's just not it's just an open thing. So yeah, I'll probably have to get with DeNova to remind them of that, or else we'll do what we have to do to make it work.
Right. I guess the main question that I had there was, do we have an explicit condition of approval? Because it's been a few years and it's tricky looking up the conditions of approval. Do we have an explicit condition of approval on that project saying that work could only be done between certain hours, basically?
Yes, we do. On the road, yes. Now they can work. Yeah, I mean they can work on the site for all day, and 8 to 5, or the normal construction hours. So any vehicles that are going to and from the site, working on the site, whether they're cement trucks or whatever, that's part of the project. When we're talking about the road closing of Appian or closing lanes on Appian, that's something that they've got to request from Public Works. And if they're requiring actually closing of the road or major construction improvements to the road on a weekend, then they have to request from us directly, a formal request.
Because I'm pretty sure there have been lanes closed there that have been not on the weekends recently.
Well, either they're doing work to the site, because they do, like I said, they have to do or redo the curb gutter and sidewalk. So I don't know if that's part of the demolition of that or the construction of that, to which probably the right-hand lane would be closed, which means that the left lane one lane would be open and the left turn would be open. So all that should still be open. But I'll be talking with KJ tomorrow, because I've got some issues with that as well, just based on some of the email threads that have been coming through, that we need to talk to them again and be very mindful of that. So when they're closing, because they're not necessarily, I know Public Works has the approval of whether they close the road or not. So that's come to them. So the construction hours are governed by us.
And I guess sort of one last question. When I tried looking on the city's website for, the underdevelopment segment in the planning department for, the conditions of approval, I wasn't able to find that under this project. Would it be possible to add a hyperlink to that under this project sort of sub-item on that page?
Yeah, we could do that.
Because I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Planning Manager Hannah Minna's report? Is there any public comment?
Yes, there is a hand raised online. Same caller, ending in 5748. When you're ready, please press *6 to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, this is Anthony, a senior citizen of Pinole Valley, over 50 years. I had a few questions for Planning Manager Hannah. First of all, with regard to the overpass on Appian Way crossover over I-80, does the city of Pinole or the public get to have any say as far as, I know it's kind of late, but with regard to the kind of structure that Caltrans is working on there, I got a funny feeling it might just turn out to be another plain Jane eyesore, like the one up by Vallejo, and one of the ones like over in Lafayette, where they have the demonstrations on the crossover with a bunch of chain link fences on both sides. And it wasn't clear at the TAPS meeting from the Public Works Director when we asked what kind of a concrete safety wall they're going to have there, if any. Like the existing structure looked nice, but maybe it's outdated, with the portholes. The one that was damaged a few times, and it has temporary aluminum crossbars on there right now. And her response was, Ms. Herba that, oh yeah, one of them is going to stay up and remain the same, you know, and the other one's coming down. So maybe you can tell us how that's going to look or work for the city of Pinot, with a bicycle path, a crosswalk, or what, I mean, a pedestrian path, what have you there. And then secondly, I noticed a lot of AT&T work going up and down Pinot Valley Road, or some few extra trucks there working on the poles and the lines. Do you know what that's all about? And does that have anything to do with the promise that was made by AT&T and or PG&E that a lot of those old poles and lines were going to be underground up and down Pinot Valley Road? Because right now they have a few trucks out there, AT&T does, from Ramona all the way out past Seamus. And they've been working there the last few days. Not to mention there's still a problem on the corner of Granada and Shea, where they got the AT&T's got those double poles strapped together. They're violating the ADA crosswalk path by obstructing it with half the wires hanging over it now. There's some loose cables, looks like, and duct ties or whatever it's called over there on those 1.5 poles that are wired together for the last several years. So other than an eyesore, it's a safety hazard. If someone whacks that or someone can't get across the crosswalk in a wheelchair, and the city will be subject to a big fat lawsuit, and then it's like, we told you so. And then lastly, or speaking, is there what's going on with the lot, that big lot? Is it still vacant with no development interest in the one next to the storage center across from the, on the corner of Ramona and Pinot Valley Road across from the high school? Yeah, I noticed the landlord sign got taken down several months ago. Either
You
was
have 1
blown
minute
down
left.
or someone knocked it down and no one's replaced it yet. And then also, how can you decide where the property line borders are for all the dead trees that are lining the sides of our street? There's one big tree up on the middle of Galbraith that could be city property, county property, or open space property, that a big giant pine tree that could set the whole of El Sobrani hillside on fire, and subject to several of our homes, including mine, up on Galbraith Hill there, that should be remediated like several months ago, but it's still dead. It's like over 100 feet tall, and just
Please
like all
wrap
the
up your
dead
comment.
trees along I-80, and also out on the Dobie Road Trail behind the dog park and caretaker's house, there's 2 or 3 dead trees there as well. That was brought up.
Thank you for your comment. Your time is up. Regarding some of the concerns, various concerns brought up by the public comment, is there any response that could be provided?
Sure. In terms of the AT&T, I'm not sure what that work is. I'd have to check with Public Works to see what they're actually doing out there. In that regard, that's the same with the PVR, the stuff at Pinot Valley Road with Shea and all that. So I would have to check with Public Works with that. Regarding the overpass, we really don't have a lot to say about the overpass. It's just Caltrans right away. So all we can do is make suggestions, and if there's some local match money that we would be able to obtain to dress up that interchange, then we would have to get some local money. But I think that's more of a safety project that was brought up by Caltrans. So I don't know where the money's coming from to fix it. So if it's just Caltrans money, then we probably don't have a whole lot to say about that. Regarding Ramona and PVR, Pinot Valley Road corner, yeah, we get lots of people wanting to use that property. However, most of the uses that are being proposed require conditional use permits, or they're not permitted. So, a lot of people are kind of walking away. So, because of that. So, but yeah, we do get interest on that corner lot. It's just a lot depending on what the use is and all that kind of stuff. So, other than that, regarding the pine trees, I'd have to find out. I think I answered this question a while ago of who owns what trees down there. But I'll check with Joe Bingaman. I mean, you can always contact Joe at Public Works. He'll answer all those questions for you regarding the trees and the parks and who owns what and the Galbraith Trail and the caretaker's house. He'll be able to answer all those questions. But I'll follow up and see where we're at with those because I've kind of lost track of those.
Thank you so much for the information on that. I did have a follow-up question on the lot next to the high school. What is it currently zoned as?
CMU.
Okay. Used to be a gas station, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So?
Yeah.
Okay, it's good to know. And with that, anything that any commissioner would like to report out? Vice Chair Menace.
Let's see. I always forget whether this is more under communications or commissioner's report, but I sent out my usual email message about this meeting and various other items happening this week as an ex parte communication. I could go into more detail on those items, but I think that falls more under communications rather than commissioner's report as such.
All right, and we will now move to communications. Any communications to report? Yes.
So I've got a few. Justin already went over the event happening on Thursday. I'd also note there's going to be a senior food distribution at the senior center tomorrow from 10 to 11 a.m. And that's going to be for seniors in the city of Pinole only. So you're going to need to provide, evidence of your residence and age, and you're going to need to fill out a form. This is a bit more complicated than the general produce distribution, but it's also higher quality food. So trade-offs. There's also going to be an art walk, sort of a downtown. Let me find the exact wording. There was a name for the festival. Let's see what my phone feels like unlocking today. That was it, Street Eats, right. So from 5 to 8 p.m., there's going to be an event this Friday and on October 10th and October 24th at the Community Corner in downtown Pinole, where they're going to have basically a bunch of special food events along with some stuff from the Pinole artisans doing various arts and crafts things from 5 to 8 p.m., so that should be fun. And the city manager is going to have her coffee event thing on Friday from 8:30 to 9:30. And there's also going to be, another event going on Saturday at the intersection of 10 and San Pablo Avenues that people will be able to find out more about when that happens. And city's still got some surveys, and the county also has a survey going on over at the CCTA that I think they're offering a potential gift card for in order to do, I think it's part 2 of their countywide transportation plan survey, so people might be interested in that. That's all the stuff I've got under communications.
Thank you, Vice Chair Menace, and no other communications. And with that, our next regular scheduled planning commission meeting, it will be on October 7th, 2025 at 7 p.m. And with that, we will adjourn.